Are you aware of the way that sanctuary policies have been put in place across the country?
That's a total pivot, dude.
No,
the fact
not.
that they were told that they
If
were
you're
not
told- if
your
you're told-
your criticism. Hold on, your
you're
criticism
told
is that they
not to
were the
support-
local police were
if you're
not
told
there
not
helping
to
them,
provide
and then you're saying
support-
that they were never told to help them. They didn't even know that they were there, but you're expecting them to just magically show up and appear. And not only that, but even when people were shot, like Preddy or like Renee Good, when they did show up to deal with these situations because it was part of their jurisdiction, the federal police cleaned everything up and moved on and said, oh, no, we got this. And they didn't got that. That's literally part of the law, that they have to allow the local authorities in to actually look at the evidence and everything. But they literally pushed local authorities out as much as they possibly could and kept them in the quiet as much as they could. It was not true that they just refused to help across the board. In lots of cases, there's even video where they are showing up to help and they're getting pushed out and asked to leave by federal officers.
Tom, Lord of the Nerds in my chat donates that this debate was Tom's Make-A-Wish request. So that one's for you, Tom.
Brilliant.
Well, I hear it. Yeah.
I think this is my first time debating a father-son duo.
You actually, yeah. We did get the shirts together as a family, but also, according to my chat, the red shirts is a classic signal of Mossad. So watch your P's and Q's. If you didn't watch Candace Owens, the maroon shirt.
This is
we're in
$7,000 for the shirt.
But let's get into it, since we're all here now. We're talking about, is the left tyrannical and corrupt today? We have a fantastic panel here to talk about it. I'm excited. Let's start with Potential Criminal. Tell us who you are, why you're here, and then give us your intro.
Okay, my name's Sean, known as Potentially Criminal. I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in Ohio. I just moved to Florida, so I'm trying to get licensed in Florida. I got to wait for that. I'm here because Ryan said, come do this. So I'm here doing this. We're going to have a fun time tonight. Hope everybody has fun.
Fantastic.
I just want to say hi, MTV. Hope this is a good interview or audition.
Yeah, there you go. And Ryan, tell us who you are, why you're here. What do you think?
Yeah, doing intros, openings. What are we doing?
Yeah, just do both if you want. Yeah, go ahead and give it.
So, I'm Ryan Mullally. I'm an attorney. I've litigated every level of the U.S. legal system up to and including the U.S. Supreme Court. My buddy Sean's here. It should be a good night, fun debate. And yeah, we're debating tonight whether the left is tyrannical and lawless. And I think the answer is obviously yes, because when the left has power, they tyrannically violate our natural rights in the spirit of our federalism, and they impose their policies on the country contrary to the consent of the government. And when they don't have power, they behave lawlessly, and they support those who are behaving lawlessly in order to promote their agenda. And we see this pattern over and over and over again. And typically, when it's pointed out, their only response is to deny any knowledge of what their side is doing, and then quickly try to pivot to argue that Trump is somehow worse. But tonight, this is an interesting moment, because tonight the prompt is only about the left, whether the left is tyrannical and lawless, and has nothing to do with Trump. And I applaud these guys for taking this prompt. It's actually very unusual for to see left-wingers take a prompt which doesn't have any relation to Trump. So I am encouraged that they took this, and I'm look forward to exploring these topics with these gentlemen and see if they're able or even willing to defend some of the tyrannical and lawless conduct of the left.
All right, thank you so much. And Mr. Criminal, would you like to give an opening before we move on to our ball having leftist down there?
No, I can't really summarize it better than Ryan did. So no, I can. I'll just defer that.
Oh, fantastic. All right, so one of our strong men down here, Tom.
Yeah, my name's Tom. Go by TOMFOOLERY Show. Stream on YouTube, mostly third shift, very late at night. 8 p.m. Eastern time till about 4 to 6 a.m. Eastern time. So long 8 to 10 hour streams on a daily basis. I am here to debate whether or not the left is lawless and tyrannical. I'm actually interested to see what possible arguments could come of this. The main thing that I would like to know is what we're even talking about when it comes to being lawless or tyrannical. I don't know what they mean when they say these words. I doubt they even came with definitions prepared, so I see they're likely scrambling to find some definitions to run with real quick. But the the idea that we're going to have a conversation about whether or not the left is lawless and tyrannical without talking about Trump seems absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we would have to know that there is some sort of consistent standard among what it is that they mean when they say the left is lawless and tyrannical. So obviously Trump will be part of the conversation, at least as a standard to see if it's held consistently. And then on top of that, we would want to know where the lines are drawn when things become lawless or tyrannical as well. So I'm interested to find out what the standards are, what the definitions are, and what it is that they think are examples of this.
Yes, I agree. Lawyers are always famously underprepared and hate definitions. It's the thing they do. I can't believe that you would come to that conclusion. It's the only conclusion, really. But Vince, well, who are you? What are you out here for? And give us your intro. What do you think?
My name is The Vince Wilson Show. I am the infamous debater on this space that has hidden in the shadows and finally decided to come out from underneath my rock and kind of awaken the dragon, if you will. So that is what we're here to do today. And as such, I always come prepared. Also, by the way, I find it very weird how me and Tom have inadvertently matched and you guys have matched. Think it's weird. Wasn't planned, but hey, we'll rock with it. It's great. Yeah. So
Okay, Fabe.
So here's my opener. Is the left lawless and tyrannical? No. And I can already predict, as Ryan has already laid out, how my opponents are going to argue that they are. They're going to give you a list, a riot, a protest that turned violent, a Democratic politician who said something irresponsible, maybe a prosecutor they don't like, maybe a governor who abused their authority. They're going to take individual examples, stack them on top of one another, and hope that the sheer volume of accusations somehow proves their argument. It doesn't, because a list of bad things is not a standard. If it were, I could spend the next several hours listing every crime, every abuse of power, and every act of political violence committed by someone on the right and simply declare victory. But that would be intellectually dishonest. It would completely avoid the actual question we're supposed to be debating tonight. The question is whether the left is lawless and tyrannical. Those words have meaning, as Tom has laid out. Lawlessness is not simply someone on your political side breaking the law. Tyranny is not a politician passing a policy you don't like. If that is a standard, then every political movement in American history is both lawless and tyrannical, and this entire debate becomes meaningless. So we need a standard, and the only intellectually honest way to establish a standard is through comparison. When someone on the left crosses a line, what happens? Do Democratic leaders condemn them? Do prosecutors charge them? Do courts intervene? Do institutions push back? Is there an attempt to hold that person accountable? Then we apply that exact same question to the right. Not a different standard, not a more forgiving standard, the exact same one. And this is where my opponent's argument begins to collapse. Because for every example they bring up on the left, we will find Democratic leaders condemning members of their own side. We will find Democratic administrations prosecuting people associated with their own political movements. We will find institutions pushing back against abuse of power. I'm wrapping it up. The left is not perfect. I've never claimed it was. But my opponents need you to believe that the imperfection is tyranny while refusing to acknowledge actual authoritarian behavior when it comes to their own side. They need you to believe that a protester throwing a brick represents the Democratic Party, but a president pardoning people who committed crimes on his behalf somehow doesn't represent him. They need you to believe that inflammatory rhetoric from a random activist represents the entire left, but inflammatory rhetoric from the most powerful Republican in the country is simply a joke. They need you to believe that every abuse of power on the left condemns the entire movement. But when their side attacks independent institutions, pressures political opponents, ignores congressional authority, or attempts to consolidate power around one man, suddenly every example must be examined in complete isolation. Do you see the game? The standard changes depending on who is being accused. The left is judged collectively. The right is judged individually. I have a few more sentences. The left is judged by its worst actors. The right demands to be judged by its best intentions, and I'm not going to allow that standard to survive this debate. But for every example they bring forward, we are going to ask the same question. Did leaders condemn it? Was there accountability? Did institutions push back? And most importantly, did the movement embrace the behavior or reject it? Because once you stop arguing from outrage and start applying a consistent standard, the comparison becomes remarkably clear.
Yeah, don't worry. That was not the longest opener we've ever had, I promise.
That's okay. I was going for a record.
Fabian's been here. Fabian Liberty's been here. We had like a 20-minute opener one time. And I was like, all right, brother.
You just went straight from, with Fabian, you just go straight from openings to closings. Speaking of which, before we get started, I just want to make sure we're on the same page with timing. I know, Sean, you have a hard out. I just want to make sure we know what the time controls are before we get started.
Yeah, I just by 9:20.
By 9:20. Okay, so Gibbs, when do you want us to wrap and go to closing?
Is that Central or Eastern time?
That's a
Night-
short debate. I had planned on going like at 3 hours minimum. Okay, we're
Yeah. Well,
No,
I mean,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
I thought- yeah.
I mean, I'm on Central time, so that's like an hour and
Okay,
45
no,
minutes.
it's
from
sorry,
now.
9:20 Eastern time.
yeah.
The only
Okay.
time it's
oh
better.
Eastern time.
Yeah.
So that's an hour and a half.
So yeah,
So-
well, I can
so
let
yeah.
you just get a closing. Ryan, are you able to go past that, Ryan?
Yeah, I can go past that.
All right, then cool. Then I'm gonna aim for a 2-hour here show.
Okay.
So yeah, perfect.
Okay.
So-
We're 15 in, but yeah, go ahead, take it from there.
So I think before we get started, it seems like there's some cleanup we have to do. It sounds like you guys want to talk definitions, which is fine. But the first thing I want to just clean up is I don't understand because both of you seem to think that we need to talk about the right or Trump or do comparisons in order to do this debate. And I'm confused by it. And here's why I'm confused by it. The prompt is the left is tyrannical and lawless. Let's say I conceded for the sake of argument. I just granted that the right is very, very bad and is the very, very, very bad. And that Trump is very, very
Yes.
bad. And we
Yes.
just concede all that stuff.
Yes.
The left could also be tyrannical and lawless, even if the right is very, very bad. So
No,
I'm
not
sure-
necessarily.
I'm not sure I
It's a
understand what
meaningless
the
statement at that
reiteration
point
is.
because it'd be a meaningless statement at that point. If the
No,
right is already tyrannical and lawless and the left is responding to a tyrannical and lawless administration, they are totally justified in their actions. And the term tyrannical and lawless is totally meaningless in that context. If we are responding to tyrannicalness and lawlessness, we are totally justified. And I would assume that we're using these terms as stigmaed terms, yes?
Well, so wait, so you're saying that if the left is doing something that is tyrannical or lawless, you think it would be justified in some circumstances. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, I'm saying that you wouldn't even phrase it as tyrannical and lawless at that point. You could call
why
the
not?
American Revolution tyrannical and lawless because they weren't abiding by what it was that the king wanted anymore. They were
Well,
doing their own thing, breaking the laws that the king had put in place and acting according to their own volition. That would be tyrannical and lawless in that context if you want to call it that. But nobody would ever call it that because they're responding to a tyrannical and lawless king.
How would the American Revolution be tyrannical?
That I literally just said.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
The fact-
it doesn't make sense.
So by definition, if the tyrannical, meaning that they are acting according to their own volition, not according to the law, and that they're doing what it is that they want for their own will, that would be tyrannical. Yes, people in charge, positions of power, breaking the laws and doing what it is that they want instead.
So if
That would be
somebody,
tyrannical.
if somebody has a revolution to institute democracy instead of monarchy, you would view that as tyrannical behavior?
Again, yes. This is why we need to define terms, is because tyrannical behavior would include the fact that you're breaking the law, you're acting according to your own volition. You're not acting in accordance with a whole system or a whole institution or a democracy or anything like that. You're acting in accordance to your wishes, your own will, and breaking the law at the same time.
Well,
Of
you
course,
seem to be
that
talking
would,
about lawlessness. I was talking about tyrannical first. We can get to
I'm talking
lawlessness,
about
but-
tyrannical. So this
Well,
is
okay,
what's
but they're-
define
they're
tyrannical
not-
then, because
they're
yes,
not.
that is. I know they're not the same, but lawlessness,
same.
but breaking the law is one aspect of political tyranny.
No, it's not.
Yes,
No,
it
it's not.
is. Okay,
No,
so then what
most-
definition are
most-
you
Then
using?
most-
define tyranny. Then define
Most
tyranny.
of the-
Can you define it?
Let me respond, and then we can. I'll
You're
respond.
not going to define it. Go ahead.
Well, Vince, if Tom asks me a question, I'm going to respond to him. And then
I
if
know.
you want
Go
me to
ask
ask a question, I can
Go
respond
ahead.
to you.
Stop
The
whining.
question
Go
was
ahead.
for the
about it.
definition.
Stop whining. Go ahead.
Tom, most of the time, tyrants are not breaking the law because they're in charge of the system and they dictate what the law is. Like a dictator for life is a tyrant, but is not lawless because they determine what the law is, right?
No, it sounds like you're defining like authoritarian or a dictator, but not a tyrant. What do you think that there's like these things are different in kind from one another?
Yeah,
Authoritarian,
I think,
tyrant.
and this is getting into Vince's thing. And if people have a different definition they'd like to use, we can talk about different definitions. For tyranny, if we're starting there, I would say that you're behaving tyrannically in America, at least, if you are imposing policy that, substantively infringes on natural rights as expressed in the Declaration of Independence, or if you are if you're conducting policy that is contrary to the consent of the governed, as again expressed in the Declaration of Independence.
Can I ask? Let me ask a question here, because all right, so I'm looking at the definition of tyranny from I don't know, Merriam-Webster, right? And it says a harsh, oppressive, and unjust form of government where absolute power is concentrated in the hands of a single ruler or small group, right?
Yeah.
So to kind of what Tom is saying, all right, I don't know if y'all have seen Andor, but I think Luthen gives a pretty good speech that matches this. He's uses the tools of my enemy to fight my enemy, and they're trying to reestablish the old republic, right? But same concept here. If you're using the tools of a tyrannical government, you're not tyrannical because you're not the system, right? Wouldn't that be kind of argument? I mean, I don't know if that's the argument Tom's making, but kind of. Right?
I frankly have no idea what the argument Tom is making.
Well, no. He's talking about so the initial question that you asked. What Gibbs is saying is that the initial question that you asked is when I say that the left would no longer, the left would no longer be tyrannical.
So
if you concede that the Trump administration, hold on. If you concede that the Trump administration is tyrannical, you kind of concede the whole debate. Because if the left is responding to a tyrannical government, they are no longer nobody would consider them tyrannical in the way that we use it colloquially.
Right. I guess the question is.
Sorry, can Sean get in? Because
go ahead.
Well, what was the Trump administration acting in response to? I mean, because then it just kind of your argument says, oh, they were reacting this. Well, these guys reacted to that, and then it goes back and forth, and then it just becomes an issue of what came first, the chicken or the egg, when you're making that argument.
Yeah, and
I think it would be consistent.
If you're opposing something, you can be just as disgusting and problematic as the thing you're opposing.
Yeah, you could have if you imagine a contrary hypothetical universe where the American Revolution occurred, but instead of instilling a democratic republic like we have, they instilled an emperor for life. Then you would have been replacing one tyranny, the English monarchy, with another tyranny. American emperor for life. The fact that you were fighting against a tyranny doesn't mean that your new system is not tyrannical. This is the thing I don't understand about your point.
The separation that you brought up earlier was that whether or not they were acting in accordance with the will of the people, if we're able to show you that the left and what it is that they're doing much more aligns with the will of the people while they're fighting against the Trump administration, especially when it comes to ICE or immigration and breaking Supreme Court orders, and these people are protesting somebody who was already acting tyrannically, they are acting more in accordance with the will of the people in that scenario.
But that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that I think you would have to agree both sides could be tyrannical.
I think it's possible, yes.
Yes, but both sides could be tyrannical. And the fact that one side is tyrannical doesn't give the other side a free pass where they're excused and nothing they do is tyrannical.
I want to be very clear. I don't think the left is, but I think the right is tyrannical. I think the left isn't, and I think that the right is. And I want to be very clear. I have a set of pillars as you went into a circular argument of what I believe tyranny is. And those pillars, to me, and I believe some scholars have even agreed to this. I'll have to look into that again. One is deploying military against domestic political opposition. 3, rule by personal decree. These might be actually a little bit out of order. Using law enforcement as a personal weapon. Hold on, I have to scroll down. I posted pictures. 5, suppressing speech and the press. And then 6, controlling national elections.
What is this from?
This is from, let me put it up here. Wait. So let me ask you something. I believe this to be the pillar. Wait, hold on, wait. I want to be very clear.
You just quoted a bunch of stuff.
No. I want to be very clear. I want to be. Wait. You're going to question me on my source of a definition, but what's your source of your definition then?
Yeah, we haven't even gotten a definition yet. Yeah, we've asked for a definition a couple of times.
Let me ask you this. Do you agree or disagree with what I have provided as the pillars?
Vince, I have
no idea. Do you agree or disagree?
Vince, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I just gave you what I believe to be the pillars of tyranny.
Documents out of order from a source, and I just asked.
My source is my debate prep. My source is my debate prep. Are we going to seriously sit here and debate over what my debate prep is? I am reading from my debate prep. Would you like my notes? Seriously, I didn't ask you about your source. Why don't you? Are we seriously going to sit here and debate about the debate? This is ridiculous.
I mean,
Let me just do this.
You're
Let me just do this.
scared and you're a coward
Vince,
to
you
even
you
counter
seem-
your
you
own
seem
flaws and
very
your own
upset.
side.
Let me
Vince, you
just
seem
try-
very upset about a very easy question.
Oh my God. All right, we're just going to keep going. I already told you where I got it from. My debate prep, buddy.
Yeah,
That's where I got it from.
So okay, let's just go with this. Do you agree with his sentiments that those would be like pillars of what tyranny is, or like?
No, I think he's describing authoritarianism.
Okay, and what is
And
the
I suspect he's reading from a definition of authoritarianism. I can't prove it because he won't tell us what he's reading. But
I just said from my debate prep, buddy.
You
want me to share my screen? I'll share my fucking screen. It shows my debate prep.
Well, he's asking where you got your debate prep from.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. But I'm gonna do this for the sake of the audience because maybe it's just me.
Well, because this is
I don't really find like a substantive difference between authoritarian and tyrannical. Like I think when we're talking about this, we're generally talking about are they corrupt? Are they doing stuff to remain in power? Is it a system? I think we can maybe move past a little bit of the in the weeds part, unless
yeah, just to be clear, I don't care about the tyrannical terms. So just hold on, wait. Just hold on. I'm not going to fight you on what a tyrant is. I'm asking you to just give me what it is that you're saying. Your claim. You have a positive claim. So what is your claim that the left is?
I did earlier. I can read it again if you'd like. You know what I was claiming was that.
Where are you getting it from? What scholar?
No.
Where are you getting it from?
I wrote this. It's my
I wrote mine too, buddy.
No, you
see how that works?
Obviously were copy and pasting it from something. And I don't know why you won't admit that.
Hey, Tom, you have my access to my debate prep. You want to check it? Actually, I can email this to Gibbs right now so he can see my debate prep too.
Sure.
Vince, is this going to be the kind of conversation where you are you not capable of having a normal
Jesus, here we
conversation?
go.
Okay, so just give me your definition.
Go ahead, buddy.
You seem very odd and very strange person.
Maga tears. Here we go. Go ahead, cry.
Let's move on a little bit.
Okay, so what is the definition that you're
we
using
have to
again?
work this out ahead of time is that authoritarianism and tyranny are not identical. And I would for example, when you see tyranny on the right, I would agree it tends to take the form of condensing power into one strongman figure. When you see tyranny on the left, it tends to take the form more of like an HOA, condensing power into a board or bureaucrats or bureaucratic system, which robs the people of their liberty collectively rather than in a centralized figure. The left and right are not symmetrical in this regard. I don't think you have to have a monarch to be a tyranny, though that is one form of potential tyranny.
Okay, so what are the characteristics? What is the definition that you're using?
I think that when a government is instituting policy without sufficient democratic imprimatur, it is engaging in tyrannical behavior.
Okay.
Do we have any objections to that?
That's fine. I would call that authoritarianism.
I think
that's fine.
I don't want to sit here and quibble quabble over this. I think it's ridiculous. I still sit there and say, but then how do you use that standard in such a way? How do we determine something is being done against the will of the people? How do we measure that? How does that measured? Because by that metric, anything, we could sit here and say that anything is tyranny and tyranny loses its meaning at that point.
No, I think that we can talk about what the people actually want and what they got and how the policy was implemented and what the policy was, and talk about whether that is sufficiently democratic or has sufficient democratic imprimatur. And
so what was the first example of that?
Okay. Sean, I know I've been monopolizing. If you want to jump in, please do. But otherwise I'll start giving some examples.
No, you have your example. If you have examples, go for it. I'll add examples here if you want to go.
Okay, so let's start with the attempts during the Biden administration to completely change the way that law is implemented in the country without imprimatur from Congress, without the will of the people, purely through executive overreach, through executive agencies in wild ways that were ultimately struck down by the court because of their unconstitutionality, but were repeatedly over and over again. And there's many examples of this. If I wanted to start with three off the top of my head, it would be the attempt to regulate the coal industry out of existence without passing a law, the attempt to impose a vaccine mandate on 100 million Americans through OSHA without passing a law, and sorry, let me look at my notes because I had a third.
Ryan, you're muted.
Yeah, you hit the mute.
Sorry, well, we can, oh yeah, sorry. And the third one was student loan forgiveness. I was trying to remember what the third in that trilogy was, where there was an attempt to do $500 billion of student loan forgiveness without passing a law or having any imprimatur in that regard. So if a government massively changes the way domestic law works, such that full industries are essentially going to be regulated out of existence, that that the executive is spending money that the Treasury didn't allocate, that they are making massive changes in policy, making healthcare decisions for hundreds of millions of Americans without the benefit of any democratic imprimatur, would that strike you as tyrannical?
If you put it in that way, maybe, but it's not the way that it actually happened. And in fact, you would actually see where Joe Biden ended up. Can you explain to me and how he ended up with student loan forgiveness, how he ended up violating the law? Can you point to a specific law that he ended up violating?
I didn't say he violated the law.
Oh, so he didn't violate
He
the law.
said he was trying to implement the law in a
Talking
new
about
way.
tyranny, not lawlessness. We can talk about lawlessness.
You said student loan forgiveness without passing a law.
Without
so
passing
where
a
is
law.
it? So where is it mandated that he must pass a law in order to put in student loan forgiveness? Can you point to that?
There's tons of things. I'm not saying it was illegal,
So
though it
can
actually
you
was.
name one?
For the record, it was illegal. The Supreme Court ruled against
Correct.
him.
And what did Joe Biden do?
It was illegal. But you are
What did Joe Biden do?
You are conflating.
What did Joe Biden do?
This was not an example of lawlessness. This was an example of tyrannical behavior. So please try to keep the two prongs
okay.
straight.
So let me get this right. So just so we're clear, you're saying then that a president trying to implement student loan forgiveness over the Department of Education is now tyrannical for doing that, and then when the Supreme Court says no, you can't do that, and he doesn't do it, then that's somehow tyranny?
What I'm saying is that it is tyrannical to take existing regulations that have nothing to do with mass student loan forgiveness, nothing to do with imposing a vaccine mandate on 100 million Americans, nothing to do with ending the entire coal industry, and to reinterpret them in a completely unforeseen way, as if you had the democratic imprimatur of the people and Congress, in an attempt to wildly change the law coast to coast in this country without the will of the people and without them saying so. And if that's not tyrannical, if it's not tyrannical, then I'm not sure how you could ever complain about anything that the executive branch is doing, because those are wild overreaches of executive authority into domestic areas where the executive is not meant to have this sort of authority. So I will grant you that thank God the Supreme Court struck down those tyrannical measures, but I don't understand why they weren't tyrannical.
When you say that it doesn't say in the law that they're allowed to go after the coal industry or end coal industry, the law would never say something like that. It would have like things that the executive branch is in charge of and things that fall under their branch. When you make it sound like, oh, well, it doesn't say anything about the fact that you're allowed to regulate the coal industry in this way, it never would. It would never say anything that specific. What is the exact contention with? Is it that he did something that the Supreme Court denied with these things, or what is the problem with what it is he's doing that makes it tyrannical?
The Biden administration consciously and purposefully created a set of emission standards that would make it impossible to run the coal plants, and did it without passing a law which would have essentially ended the coal industry. They were regulating the coal industry out of existence without a law being passed, based off of capacious and broad language that had never been used used for such a purpose before, which is why the Supreme Court struck it down in West Virginia v. EPA. I think it was 2000 or no, it was 2022, if I recall correctly, under the major questions doctrine. But the point I'm making is that Congress, people didn't vote for this. And if you went to Congress and tried to pass a law that did you could never have gotten it passed. Never in a million years could you have gotten that passed. Yet they did it anyway. You could never have gotten the COVID vaccine mandate for 100 million Americans passed if you had tried to pass a law. Yet they did it anyway. The reason I'm calling it tyrannical is that they are bypassing the democratic process and using the unconstitutional fourth branch of government, the overreaching federal agencies, to cram down on Americans against their will. And that does strike me as tyrannical.
So would you say then issuing executive orders or national emergencies would be tyrannical then, because you're not going through Congress in order? As a matter of fact, national emergencies necessarily would take some of that power from Congress and bring it to the executive branch. So would not those be tyrannical by your own definition? It depends. Why does it depend? I'm using your own definition of, you're saying that the point of it being tyrannical is because Joe Biden did not go through Congress to pass these things. So by necessity, to be consistent here, you would have to say then that issuing national emergencies, which literally pulls power away from Congress, would have to necessarily be tyrannical.
It wouldn't have to be necessarily, no, because if I'm doing it in an emergency, I don't have time for Congress to dick around. That's different than I'm doing it and nobody wants me to do it. I think you can argue those are two different reasons why you may have an emergency power.
There's also differences in terms of what power is being used. Like, one of the things that made the vaccine mandate or the student loan stuff so offensive from a tyrannical perspective is that these are areas where the federal government is not supposed to have this much power. The federal government, there's obviously, defense, immigration, trade. There are national issues where the federal government has an outsized role because we're one nation. But healthcare decisions within a state, like, do I get a vaccine or do I not get a vaccine? That's typically a state power, a local power, not a federal power. So not only is it overreach, it's overreach into an area where the federal government is not supposed to have this level of power within our constitutional structure. So it's overreach on top of overreach, which is why I was saying it depends. It depends on, there's facts and context. As Sean was saying, there are emergency situations, like if we're being invaded, I don't think anyone's going to say it's tyrannical to muster the troops to fight back. But there are going to be, that said, you can still be tyrannical because of overreach. So yeah,
gotcha. So the federal overreach. So if the federal government is taking powers away from the states, I don't know, let's say in like elections, you would say that's tyrannical, right?
Let's say that I grant. This is why I was saying I don't. No.
I told you guys I would do it. I told y'all I would show the hypocrisy. Go ahead, though. Go ahead.
Let's say I grant it. Let's say, actually, for the sake
of
argument,
comes the double standard, y'all.
Grant the right's tyrannical. So what? What we're talking about is whether the left is tyrannical. So if the right is tyrannical, that doesn't change whether the left is tyrannical. The left.
By the way, I disagree with the fact that it's tyrannical. By the way.
Okay, but a counterexample doesn't disprove that the left was tyrannical. So would you like to address my example?
I don't have to prove that the left is tyrannical. I have the negative position. I will tell you, though, that I don't think, based upon the pillars that I gave you earlier that you cried about, I don't believe that it is tyrannical for the federal government necessarily to override states' authorities. We saw this, by the way, with the Biden administration when Texas cried about it. We saw this where the national emergencies, where Donald Trump implemented the National Guard and overrode states' wishes to put in the military, the Marine Corps specifically, into Los Angeles. So, yes, I think that there are certain things. And we actually, by the way, a good point, a good example of this that I would say why it's not tyrannical is because there are certain instances in which the states are not doing what is regulated by the law in this. And I think Mississippi is a classical example of this. I think I got into this one. I think it was on your panel, Tom, actually, where we talked about this. I would say that that's not tyrannical if the states are not enforcing federal law. The federal government has an authority to be able to go in and do so. I don't think it's inherently tyrannical because the federal government's overriding what the state's wishes are.
None of this matters at all. Let's say I grant,
Of course it does.
for the
What-
sake of
hold
ar-
on, hold on.
for
What
the sake of
Mississippi thing are
argument,
you
let's say I
talking-
grant that the right is tyrannical. For the
Just
sake of
grant me the
argument,
argument. Just grant me the entire debate. You keep
I'll
granting me
grant it,
stuff here. Give me them all.
The debate is about whether the left is tyrannical. So if I grant
While
you that the
ignoring your
right
own
is-
side,
if
as I stated
grant
in
you
your
that the
doing.
right is tyrannical, that doesn't
You're not
mean
granting
that the
me
left
anything. You're
isn't
doing that to kind of
tyrannical.
keep going back to this point without addressing your own problem.
Because
When
what-
I expose
no,
the fallacy in your own
what I'm-
argument,
what I'm
it can't
pointing out is
necessarily
that
be
your
tyrannical.
rebuttal is irrelevant to the prompt. As Tom
It's not.
already conceded, two sides can be tyrannical
There we
at
go.
the same time. So even if I granted you that the right is tyrannical, that doesn't impact whether the left is being tyrannical. It's possible for them both to be tyrannical. So
No, but
would
it
you like
exposes
to
your double
answer-
standard.
Would you like
me-
to answer my example now? Which, by the way,
Well, it just-
neither
it
of
doesn't-
you
it doesn't
have
feel
given
like there's-
any rebuttal to.
Well, let me
Yeah,
let me
just- it
go to
doesn't-
Sean. Let me go to Mr. Criminal. You were just trying to get in, then we'll go to Tom.
Okay,
Go
yeah,
ahead. Then I want to go to Tom. Right
Well,
after that.
I'm curious to know, what were you, Vince? You said you were on Tom's panel talking about Mississippi. What about Mississippi? I didn't.
I think it was
I did
Mississippi. It
have
was
to
the
hear.
one where they weren't enforcing federal laws to desegregate schools.
Oh, you mean
So,
Arkansas? Okay.
Arkansas. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
No, but I understand what you're getting at there. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is why you like.
Well, I mean, that's
keep-
deploying the military to a local government. That seems pretty tyrannical. Then, I mean, they sent the
So-
101st Airborne Division in to do it.
I know. I don't think, and this is the problem is that that's why I said that the definition that you get, because here's the thing, I don't believe that the federal government.
I'm just
I
using
think
your definition.
my definition was not.
You're talking
that.
about deploying federal troops.
Oh, deploying
yeah.
the military against. Well, first I put deploying military against domestic political opposition, and
There
naming
was-
one of those.
Roy
That was one of my
Favis
pillars.
was domestic political opposition. The state of Arkansas did not want to integrate the schools districts. So, I mean, that's domestic political opposition.
That's a valid criticism. However, I don't think that just because you've met one of those pillars that everything else has been succeeded. I'm
Well,
willing to
not
concede
saying-
that point.
I'm not saying
that's,
every single
that's
one
a valid.
of them.
That's
It's
valid.
just- but I'm just trying to point out, like, you're like, well, I got all these pillars. It's like, yes, but there's always all kinds of caveats and exceptions to everything. So having a caveat or granting something doesn't mean you're giving a position.
Well,
up.
okay,
You're
I'll put it
pointing
this
out,
way
like,
to
well,
something
what
that
does
y'all
this
might
mean to that?
understand. I'll put it this way to something that y'all might understand. Okay, and this is how I view tyranny. Okay, and this is what is in my debate prep notes before we go down this rabbit hole again. The way I view it is probably something that you guys can empathize with, which is the self-defense doctrine. Right? There are certain. And Andrew Branca, I think, is one of the guys that I think about all the time when he talks about the 5 elements of self-defense, right? All of those elements have to be met in order for, I think it's all, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe all elements have to be met to be self-defense or
More or less, yeah.
more or less. So when I look at these pillars, you may meet one, but if you are void of the other 4, then you're not really meeting that standard of tyranny. So could we say that there is a tyrannical
Well, what you're
act that
giving
has
are
been-
like common characteristics.
Well, I'm just pointing
Hold
out
on,
that.
let Tom
Okay.
get in there real quick, and then y'all can answer it. That way you can respond.
So I did want to go back to, like, when it comes to like the coal example, I don't understand where this meets your definition of tyrant, because what you gave was that it's not meeting it doesn't represent the will of the people, or it doesn't go through Congress, which obviously these didn't go through Congress. But the idea that somebody just does, like a president tries something that ought to go through Congress and it fails, that this is automatically considered tyrannical just by attempting it seems a little ridiculous. But the fact that like this did like the majority of Americans were in favor of much heavier restrictions on coal. Only 18% of Americans were against much harsher restrictions on coal. And so I don't understand how this wouldn't be representative of the people, even if it doesn't meet our guidelines for how our institutions ought to work.
So let me give you an example because you guys constantly want to talk about the right, that might be helpful. Let's imagine that we took some federal law that let's say Title IX, right, which gives money to universities and imposes upon them certain rules and regulations about how they have to conduct themselves. Right? Are you familiar?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah. And let's say that the Trump administration completely misinterpreted Title IX, just like they changed what everything meant. They changed it in such a way that they were able to force their policy on every university across the country through Title IX, even though that clearly wasn't what Title IX was about and wasn't what Congress passed. Would you have a problem with that? Would you call that like a tyrannical act?
It depends on, like, obviously I would need more context, but that likely, yes.
Okay, like for example, if they said, we interpret Title IX such that universities are obligated to suspend and punish students who are not sufficiently pro-Israel or who voice too much support for Palestine, you would find that to be tyrannical, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the Biden administration reinterpreted the word sex in Title IX to include gender and forced every university in the country to change its policies on trans issues and to then enforce trans issues in terms of the way students spoke to each other, which chilled speech on trans issues across the entire country. So that's the sort of thing that I'm pointing out.
Title IX
tyrannical
includes gender, though. It doesn't. He didn't interpret it to include gender. Title IX does say sex and gender.
Title IX had been about sex, about getting women into sports forever. That's what it was about. And then the Biden administration reinterpreted it for the first time ever to include gender expression as protected under Title IX, such that universities had to change their policies across the country, which was wildly unpopular, as we've seen, as the trans issue has played out over time. So by your own admission, isn't that tyrannical?
I don't know that that's a bad faith interpretation of it, though. I think that, one, the fact that it does say sex and gender in Title IX. Two, the fact that there isn't like while I agree that that is the way that it had been interpreted generally up until then, there hadn't been strict guidelines given on what these terms actually meant, and that there should be court cases that did outline this, which was one of the problems that Jackson had in the last ruling. Was why she dissented wasn't that she disagreed on whether or not women are protected class, and whether or not biology, like whether or not a woman means a adult human female, but whether or not they had even litigated the terms that are being used here before they go and make a decision on this. That's probably going to need to be litigated at some point.
So where in Title IX does it talk about gender?
Let me pull it
Because
up.
I was looking it up while you were talking, because it struck me as strange. And as I'm reading it, it says, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Now, I agree that the Biden administration interpreted on the basis of sex to mean on the basis of gender, but I don't think that's a good faith interpretation of that language.
There are numerous cases that did include gender. I could have sworn
I'm
that
talking
the
about the
actual
law, the Title IX law, the actual
initial
law.
Title IX law did include this. Give me a second.
I thought there was something to do with Obama implementing something to do with gender into Title IX. That was one of the reasons why there was an issue or something.
They might issue regulations which would interpret the law, but the law says no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded.
Wait, but that if you're
Do you
saying
want
that
me,
they're
do you want me to show you the law? I pulled it up.
But even if you're saying that they're adding regulations that include gender, that there is precedent that would include this going forward, and you're acting like Biden had a brand new interpretation of this that had never been included before, and now you're
reinterpreted sex to include gender, which clearly is not what is meant by sex. The law passed by Congress in 1972 was about getting women into sports. It was not about getting men who think that they are women into women's sports. Like, this is clearly a different thing.
So Title IX included more than just sex, but
I think
It's
where I'm
like
a
the
little,
point of Title IX is to make sure that people
But-
aren't being
but
discriminated
Tom-
based on immutable characteristics, right?
But Tom, you earlier, I gave you an example of how wildly misinterpreting law through regulation could be tyrannical. You conceded that that would be tyrannical. Then I pointed out that Biden did the exact thing that that I gave in my hypothetical Trump doing, and now suddenly you're gun shy about it being tyrannical.
I think that if you're intentionally interpreting something in bad faith, yes. But when we're obviously looking at other scenarios where gender was included in this, that does not seem like an intentionally bad faith
Gender is not
interpretation.
included in the law, Tom. This is just
No,
something.
yeah,
that the
it's
Biden administration
included in
added.
regulations that that is part of the precedent for how Title IX is being used going forward.
Okay,
Yes?
and how
Wait,
are
wait, you
regulations
agree with that? Yes.
and how are regulations promulgated?
You agree that
How
that
are
gender has been
regulations
well.
promulgated?
But you do agree with that, yes?
Tom,
That it
how
has
are
been used.
regulations
So you're not going to
promulgated?
answer this. Why are you doing this? Why won't you
Because
answer the
your
question?
question will make a lot more sense if you answer mine. How are regulations promulgated?
In what way?
In any way, do you know how regulations are promulgated?
Well, it depends on what you mean by promulgated. In what way? Like in
Okay,
what
I'll
way are
just
they being
answer because I don't
promulgated?
think you know.
Okay.
The agency passes their own regulations. So yes,
Okay.
the Biden agency determined that the Biden agency was able to reinterpret the word sex to mean sex and gender. That's the tyrannical part. It's not that because the people weren't involved. It was just the agency reinterpreting its own law. This is why the right was delighted when the Supreme Court finally knocked down Chevron and said that the courts can actually get in here and determine that agencies are out of their fucking minds. Because the agency is just making up what the law is. The law says sex, and the agency goes, yeah, that means sex and gender. We think
question. Ryan, was Chevron doctrine in place at the time of Joe Biden?
Chevron?
The Chevron doctrine that you're talking about, was that in place during the Joe Biden administration?
When was Loper decided, Sean? I can't remember.
Chevron. I'm talking about Chevron doctrine,
Okay,
sir,
well,
that you just admitted.
No.
When was the Chevron doctrine overturned? Because see, here's the reality that Ryan is just accident. Here's the problem that Ryan just accidentally.
Bringing up Loper.
Here's the problem that Ryan just accidentally walked. Here's the problem that Ryan just accidentally walked into. I'll explain it. I'll just explain it because you're just going to keep sitting here dancing around it. The reason why is because Ryan just accidentally said that Joe Biden, under the Chevron doctrine, was allowed to interpret, or his departments were allowed to interpret it as they see fit because Chevron was not overturned yet. You just admitted that that's tyranny because they were doing something they were allowed to constitutionally because it had not been overturned yet. Just because you didn't think it was a valid doctrine doesn't mean that it wasn't in place at that time and that Joe Biden had the rights to do so. It eventually got overturned, yes, but guess what? It was in place during the Joe Biden administration.
Vince, honestly, I don't know why I got to keep spelling this out for you, but are tyranny and lawless the same thing?
Holy shit. This is how dishonest you are now. Do you realize that?
No. Vince, I can get there in one question. If I had enough votes, if enough people in the country wanted to do it, and I'd passed a law, a constitutional amendment, let's say, I had the votes for it, that said all Democrats need to be tied up in the town square and beaten with sticks. And that was legal. I had the votes. All the people voted for it. I had the constitutional amendment 100% legal. Would that be tyrannical of me to say that all the Democrats should be beaten with sticks? Even if it's legal, would that be tyrannical, Vince?
I will say legality doesn't necessarily behest
so then why the fuck are you talking about legality when we're talking
because you
about
because of you said no. He's so upset. Hey,
it's
Tom,
unbelievable the way that you
can
this topic.
I just want to be very clear.
Understand what the fuck
did
we're talking
Ryan
about.
not bring up?
Want to talk about lawlessness?
Did Ryan bring up the fact that they were doing it against the will of the people, and he kept referencing Congress, and he kept referencing something that was against the law. He continuously did so, and now here he is changing the definition.
I didn't
in
say
real
it was against
time.
the law, you slow motherfucker.
So
get back on your short bus.
Let me ask this question because I know we can move along. This is here in a second. Maybe this will be a segue into it somehow. But I am a little bit confused because I can like see everything you're saying, like, oh, they're all tyrannical, all this is tyrannical. However, like if it's the law and we're open, and you just said this even, and they're openly doing it, and it's the law and they're tyrannical, doesn't that mean they can't be lawless then?
Yeah,
It's like,
we're talking about the tyrannical
Yeah,
prong. We
okay,
can
I'm
go
just-
to we can go to
Sure.
the lawless
Yeah,
prong.
the
but
laws
the-
is a little more of like the
yeah,
now
the-
versus
right now we're talking about
Okay,
the tyrannical.
just-
If you go back to my opening, what I said in my opening is that when the left has power, they behave tyrannically, which does not mean illegally. It means that they are imposing
Okay,
their
let me
will against the
pose
consent
one
of the
more
governed.
question.
And then when they are out of power, they behave lawlessly.
So let me-
So
let me-
right now, because I was talking about tyranny, we were talking about things that were done by the Biden administration. If we want to switch to lawlessness, we can switch to lawlessness, and that's a great thing to talk about.
No, before we do that though, let me try to maybe do one more little. Let me just throw something else out here real quick because I like. What about like the and part, like what, like right now? Because I get like what Mr. Colonel here just said, where it's like, okay, yeah, they're definitely lawless now, right? Okay, but they're not. I'm kind of wondering, like, you know, the argument I hear from a lot of conservatives, right? At least my segment of them is they have the deep state, right? This is just like, when they say that, they don't necessarily mean it's the Illuminati. They mean it's like an entrenched system, right? That's like controlling things, and they think it's corruption. And they're saying, yes, it is tyrannical because they're subverting it, and it's corruption. You're saying they were tyrannical, now they're just lawless. Are either of y'all here on the right arguing that like they're both at the same time, or is it just like depending on who's in power? I guess
Well,
is kind of what I'm asking.
when
Because
you
that matters a lot, I think, in this conversation.
I think
when you're in power, you don't have to be lawless because you control what the laws
Okay.
are.
yeah.
Right. When you're out, like when you're in power, you can behave tyrannically by manipulating the law against the consent of the governed. And when you're out of power, then you behave lawlessly. But I think we can talk
Yeah.
about lawlessness because I think
I mean, this is why I brought this
Well,
up
yeah, I
at the
know, that's
beginning,
why
is
I'm
because
asking, 'cause I don't think they
from
agree with that,
every definition that I went over for political tyranny, not just like my mom told me to clean my room 2 days in a row, so she's a tyrant, but like for U.S. legal tyranny, the definition and meaning says tyranny refers to a form of government where power is exercised in an oppressive, arbitrary, and unjust manner. It typically involves the violation of laws that define how authority is distributed and exercised within a state. The tyrant is often characterized by their absolute authority, leading to an abuse of power that disregards the rights and freedoms of the individuals. So this is why I keep like including the fact that they are breaking laws, is because from every definition that I got for political tyranny, not just a colloquial tyranny, that it includes that they are breaking laws. But when you're separating lawlessness and tyranny, I agree that they are separate things, because lawlessness is only one aspect of political tyranny, whereas the others are just, you're just lawless, you're just breaking laws.
Let's imagine that the Trump administration only enforced tax rules against Democrats, right? Like they never brought tax cases. Like if they wouldn't audit anybody who's not a Democrat. They never brought tax cases against anyone who's not a Democrat. Now this is all legal. I can tell you they have discretion about which cases to bring. They can choose who to charge with crimes, right? But they only do it against Democrats. Is that tyrannical?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, but it's not necessarily lawless. And I think you said this at the end there. So this is the point I'm making. You can be tyrannical without breaking the law. You can be tyrannical by the way you apply the law, the way you misinterpret the law, the way that you use the law.
Okay, I don't know that I would call it tyrannical. I would say that it's wrong. I don't know that it's necessarily tyrannical just because they did something, because I would call it like discriminatory, but I don't know that I would call it necessarily tyrannical. But I think that like the discriminatory aspect is something that we would consider to be like against the rights of other people.
What if the Trump administration only charged the left with crimes so that a bunch of Democrats were doing jail time and Republicans weren't doing jail time, even though they'd done the same thing?
I don't think necessarily.
You don't think that's tyrannical?
I don't think necessarily just saying that. This is where, and I think Tom has emphasized this, I've emphasized this, and to some extent or another, you guys have also emphasized this, which is context matters here. Like to sit here and say, well, if all Democrats, is that not tyrannical? It's like, well, hold on. What's for example, I'll give you a good example of this. J6. Everybody on J6 was charged with a crime, right? If we're just to sit there and go at the time, is it tyrannical? Let me ask you, Ryan, in this case, do you think J6 was tyrannical then by your own definition?
Are you asking me like about the riot, the J6 riot?
Like the people, in other words, like the people that got charged, right? that because everybody got charged. Was Joe Biden, or incorrectly, actually, Donald Trump was the one who charged majority of them. Would you say that Donald Trump was tyrannical?
No, I don't think so. Personally,
Even though he only charged all Republicans by your own definition, that would have been tyrannical, correct?
yeah, but in my hypo,
Well, actually, that
there
one-
were
that-
there were equal number
hold-
of people
hold-
committing
hold-
a similar crime, and only. Oh, sorry, Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean the hypo wouldn't work there because if like you would have to say there'd be like 1,000 Democrats and 1,000 Republicans both standing there in like the House chamber on January 6th, and only the Republicans or only the Democrats, based purely on ideological reasons, would being punished. If only one group of people has committed a crime and you're prosecuting them, that's not really tyrannical. It's if they broke the law, then they're prosecuted. If there's not another group of people that are getting like special dispensation, that's where you kind of get this tyrannical argument. But like yes, there were no Democrats there at January 6th, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, there's probably wasn't many at all. I don't see.
Yeah,
okay,
but
like,
it's
people
more
in
about
maybe-
the like
maybe
the
one. But
the
I'm just
idea
saying.
that was given earlier
It's not
by
what Enrique
Ryan is that
Torrio
like
says.
if
Well,
the idea that was given earlier by Ryan was
Federico
that
says
like
a
if
lot
you're
of things, he's a
charging
Fed.
if you're charging Democrats or punishing, like the thing that we're worried about is the punishment, whether or not people are being punished equally, among Democrats and Republicans. And so if hypothetically, if there were like thousands of people who were charged and convicted for BLM riots, but then right wingers who went and did January 6th all got pardons, like obviously the outcome there would be very disproportionate between one side and the other. And so I agree that like I agree that like the discriminatory factor there is something that we would consider to be wrong, but I don't know about like tyrannical. And on top of that, as he said, like within the context, if we're just saying that like everybody's tyrannical, I just don't know that it means much in the in this context. If we're just saying like, yeah, Trump's tyrannical, the right's tyrannical, the left's tyrannical, Joe Biden's tyrannical, everybody's tyrannical, but that just means that Joe Biden is tyrannical, and so therefore we win. Like it feels like a meaningless conversation.
Okay, but oh, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
No, I was going to say this kind of, and just because I don't have a million hours tonight, this kind of where initially I was talking to Ryan about this was you're bringing up, disproportionate impacts or sentencing or treatment or punishment was where this kind of initially started was with the Texas, and you guys might take objections, but I'm going to say the Texas Antifa cell, the one guy getting 100 years in prison and the rest of the main people that were running around trying to LARP their little revolution got about 500 years total, and then the next batch of them got up to 20 or 30 years for their roles in that. And then there's also now the indictments out of Minnesota against the organizational efforts to obstruct ICE that were going on, and that's kind of where I was actually, when I talked to Ryan about this and he kind of talked to Gibbs, that was kind of where this was like starting to go more or less.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue because we talked about tyranny a little bit. That's like the lawlessness part. Would you guys?
Yeah.
I mean, Sean teed this up. Would you guys agree that
Go for it.
Antifa is lawless?
Yeah, generally, yeah, sure.
I don't. So the entire premise behind like is Antifa being lawless? Sure, but is the entire left wing movement, as the prompt stated, lawless? No, I don't think Antifa speaks for the masses. In fact, and this is where I mentioned in my opening, you can look at the anytime that there's been BLM protests, anytime that there's been Antifa protests, Chaz, Chop, whatever it may be, guess what? There were charges that were brought against it and condemnations from the highest Democratic representatives of that area and even at the national level as well. So again, lawlessness does not necessarily mean someone broke the law, as I stated in my earlier statement. Lawlessness is a systemic issue at the highest levels. Is the entire system itself condemning it? Are they sitting there and are they charging these individuals? Are they letting them get away? Now, I will say, this is where I said earlier, and this is why I think it's important to compare and contrast. It's pretty clear when we look at the right, how they behave when it comes to lawlessness. Now, I know you don't want to talk about the right, but that's just an objective fact based on what we're seeing so far.
So if the right were, for example, to not send police to stop a violent riot organized by violent rightist militant types, would you consider that to be lawless, Vince?
Would they not send? Just
Yeah,
skip You're bad at gotcha games. I know where you're going. You're going with some kind of a leftist argument and saying that there was some kind of a leftist or Democratic mayor who did not send in the military or the National Guard or police into a particular area. Can you just skip to it? We're not going to play gotcha games. Go ahead and skip just right on to it.
Okay. Well, what I was actually teeing up was January 6th and the National Guard. I was assuming that you thought it was a problem that the National Guard wasn't called in during January 6th because you think that when there's a violent riot, that the people in charge of local police should, in fact, send the local police to stop the riot from taking place. That's what I was getting at. Does that sound right to you?
Under the premise of under the premise, if the premise were true that there were a riot, then yeah, they should probably send somebody in and actually help stop that riot.
So then New Jersey, and this is, to your
here he goes. He got the gotcha. Go ahead.
So then
yeah.
the New Jersey should have sent in local police instead of waiting 3 days, when there were riots at the ICE facility in New Jersey, right?
Was there a riot at the ICE facility? I don't know.
Yes, there was a riot at the ICE facility.
There are quite a few.
Wait. Who declared it a riot?
The mayor of.
He almost said it. Y'all caught that? He almost said it. The police. Someone had to have declared it a riot, correct?
Got arrested for assaulting an ICE officer, as did 2 members of Congress. Did you not hear about this?
I heard about the New Jersey facility. I just find it interesting. Who declares it a riot?
I'm saying it's a riot. When there's a bunch of people who are assaulting federal
police
officers.
can declare a riot, Vince, but you can also look at
how many people were
and say,
arrested during
"Holy
that
shit,
protest,
that's a
by the way?
riot."
How many people were arrested?
I don't know, Vince, but what I'd like to get back
80 people.
to is what you said.
Well, it sounds
earlier.
like you're saying that they didn't get arrested for 3 days. You're saying that they didn't send anybody there for 3 days.
Did not intervene for a number of days, and a memo was sent out by local government saying that they should not assist. And I'm saying that it is lawless for the Democratic establishment in New Jersey to refuse to break up riots and felonies committed against federal officers because they don't like the politics of President Trump. I think that's lawless. And I think you guys would agree because that's the exact thing that people criticized Trump for not doing during January 6th. So I don't see how you can get out of that.
So what I'm seeing here was that it said it was a memo. So as a New York Police Department memo instructed officers not to respond to 911 calls at Delaney Hall without immediately notifying a field supervisor. Federal officials criticized. Hold on. Because it looked like there was like I said, there was at least 80 arrests. And they also,
it says
the
that,
issue there
they
was that it
sent
was a
state
federal
police
facility as well.
instead. Yeah, it says that they sent state police instead, and that the memo was just saying that the Newark police were supposed to pull back from responding to standard service calls
and as a result,
at the facility.
It took multiple days for the riots to be broken up because the locals weren't there for many days when they could have been there at the beginning. And this is not a new trend. If I know you guys probably looked at the footage of Renee Good and Alex Preddy losing their lives, which I think was upsetting. And I think everyone was horrified to watch it. But one of the things that struck me when I was watching Renee Good, for example, drive her car back and forth across the road is that where are the locals enforcing traffic? Where were the locals enforcing crowd management? And the answer was Minnesota wasn't sending locals to assist. And because they were not sending locals to assist, things escalated. Renee Good
there were
would be
numerous
alive.
statements from local officers saying that, or local police departments saying that they weren't even aware that the ICE officers were coming and doing canvassing on those days in those areas.
Tom, are you aware of the way that sanctuary policies have been put in place across the country?
That's a total pivot, dude.
No,
the
it's
fact
not.
that they were told that they
If
were
you're
not
told- if you're told-
your criticism. Hold on, your
you're
criticism
told
is that they
not to
were the
support-
local police were
if you're
not
told
there
not
helping
to
them,
provide
and then you're saying
support-
that they were never told to help them. They didn't even know that they were there, but you're expecting them to just magically show up and appear. And not only that, but even when people were shot, like Preddy or like Renee Good, when they did show up to deal with these situations because it was part of their jurisdiction, the federal police cleaned everything up and moved on and said, oh, no, we got this. And they didn't got that. That's literally part of the law, that they have to allow the local authorities in to actually look at the evidence and everything. But they literally pushed local authorities out as much as they possibly could and kept them behind, kept them in the quiet as much as they could. This is not the standard. It was not true that they just refused to help across the board. In lots of cases, there's even video where they are showing up to help, and they're getting pushed out and asked to leave by federal officers.
So we have a memo in New Jersey that says don't answer calls for help unless your supervisor clears it. And in fact, they were not sent, the New Jersey locals were not sent for days to this riot where they could have been sent earlier. Then we have, video
When did the
evidence
riot
in
first start?
Minnesota of the locals not providing support. We have sanctuary policies that expressly say
In
that
Newark, they
local
were
government
there
is
on the
not
perimeter.
supposed to support
were there.
federal immigration enforcement. So I guess I'm wondering, what would it take for you to recognize that local democratic government has actively been attempting to be not supportive for ICE, which I don't think is controversial because they keep saying it, that they don't want to support ICE. They want to abolish ICE. They don't want immigration enforcement. People that they talking about jackbooted thugs on the ground. I don't know, what would it take for you to say, it does look like these local governments are not actually supporting this effort. They are actually keeping the cops away.
I first off, I wouldn't have a problem if they actually weren't supporting them, but I haven't seen any evidence that actually makes that seem to be the case. Like in the case in Newark, the local police were there holding a perimeter. The state police were the ones who were supposed to be closer to the federal facilities. When it comes to jurisdiction, they have to have different lines of police who have access to different areas. Federal facilities, the state police are I don't remember if the state police are actually able to help with federal facilities either, but I know that the local police are not allowed to go on and start arresting people on federal grounds. And so the idea that just because they didn't do this, when they were there, they were holding a perimeter, they were around, and they were arresting people. The fact that the three people were arrested for some of these things by local police is evidence that they were there. And they were helping to some extent.
Sorry, you said people were... Okay, Sean, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I kind of want to go back to something, Tom, you were saying, though. The city was, they were not being involved. Well, the city said, fuck off, we don't want you here. And like Minneapolis, for example, they passed ordinances. Law enforcement is not allowed to assist them. You are to stay away. You're not
Which
to
city
give
are we
them help.
talking
You're not
about?
to give them support. Minneapolis. So, there were times where, we weren't being told they were going on, but for a majority of the way Minneapolis dictated its policy to the police, they didn't want them helping at all. So this idea, they didn't ask for help. Well, they were already told, go fuck yourselves. So they, what do you, I mean, they've done that.
You're saying the city, the mayor said this? Who said this?
The city of Minneapolis.
Right.
They told
the mayor,
they told the police, they
the
passed a city
buildings,
ordinance, a city law. You are not when they're out patrolling and doing immigration enforcement, you are not to assist them or help them. So not even.
I'm asking what you mean by the city. I'm asking, are you saying the mayor said this, or
the city council told the police department, you are not allowed to do this. That's what I mean. The city, if you're a police officer, you work for the town, right?
The city council told them they're not allowed to canvass the area? Yes, they passed an
ordinance. You are not allowed to assist.
No, the local police were not allowed to assist.
Yeah, you're not allowed to assist.
ICE officers.
Does that apply sheriffs and stuff because there's different divisions?
Or that would be a separate. I'm just curious. I don't know if they have. If they're one of those where the city and the county are one big thing. I don't.
Sure.
Okay.
I was just curious.
But I mean, So the idea, they weren't allowed to be there from the start, and then when you don't have them there to be involved, things happen. So you can't go they needed more help. Well, yeah, they weren't allowed to have the help.
Yeah, they're not allowed to.
The city didn't want to comply with that stuff.
Yeah, assisting in federal ICE raids is different than them like. So if we were saying that like they were
Oh,
supposed to
I
hold
would
a
argue
perimeter, if we're
plowing
saying
the
that they're
road of
supposed to
Ubers,
arrest
like,
people who are like harassing them, throwing things at them, that makes sense to me. But if they're supposed to actually assist in like
no, and
like grabbing
but
people
it's,
from their
well, no,
homes
that's not what
and doing
it's
federal jobs, that's
yeah, well, no, but I mean, it includes like the way the statute was written or the ordinance written. It was like including not limited to setting up a perimeter, otherwise controlling public areas for the purpose of helping enforce federal immigration law. Like they were told, you cannot help them.
in setting up a
in
perimeter.
terms of this,
I-
in terms of the
I'm just saying,
systemic,
like that's an example of like how that.
So I want to be very
and
clear.
I
here.
guess what I'm trying to get at is that there's because you guys asked earlier, and I think this is Vince's point about the need for like some kind of systemic allegation rather than individuals. Like I think we all, and I think both of you, I'm not sure Vince did, but I know Tom did, said that Antifa is lawless, which I think is a fair admission because they clearly are. But so you have Antifa, which is the violent center of protests, and in their own words, use the broader protest as cover and try to get more protesters there to cover for their violent activities. And they have, chat messages and logs where they document all of this. Then you have, memos like the one we talked about where local police are discouraged and told not to help. And in the case of like Delaney Hall, for example, at least on the timeline I have, they weren't really there until the Friday, but the conflict started on the 25th. It wasn't until like the 29th that the New Jersey State Police took over crowd control from ICE. So there were days and days where they weren't there. Then you have prominent Democratic politicians calling to abolish ICE, calling them jackbooted thugs, calling them fascists and tyrants, kidnappers. You have documents that show that this is the correct language to use, that you want to talk about ICE kidnapping people, not detaining people. So what I see is a broad effort to facilitate the lawlessness on the left, where police don't show up to help, where the politicians call for action, and where predictably
Which politicians?
Antifa show up and then do violent Antifa things.
Hold on, wait a minute. What call to action? Specifically, what it sounds like you linked it to Antifa is if they sent out a bat signal to Antifa to show up. Can you name like which politician put out a call to action?
Actually, what I said is that they called to abolish ICE, called them jackbooted thugs and fascists, referred to detainment as kidnapping. That's what I said.
So they said,
do you think left-wing politicians didn't do all those things?
I think they may have said that, but they also at the same time.
Okay.
So at the same time,
don't correct me if I'm just right.
I don't know which politicians you're referring to. I'd be happy to engage if you told me which politician it was, but you're not providing it. You're not providing me who it is. Give me the quote. Give me the person. I don't know who you're talking about. Did some leftists say that? I'm sure there's plenty of leftists out there that are saying a whole bunch of unhinged shit. But I don't know what you're referring to. You're just like saying alluding to some vague politician in some quote.
Okay, Representative Pramila J. Paul has repeatedly called to abolish ICE and described enforcement as terrorism. She urged accountability and resistance to, quote, rogue agents. AOC praised protests resisting ICE agents, saying secret police do not belong here, and supported mobilizations against raids. She has advocated abolishing or dismantling ICE. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries has criticized ICE for targeting law-abiding immigrant families, pushed reforms and opposed fundings, calls the border-backed resistance calls it brutality.
These are just facts. Those are just facts. They have detained people
unlawfully.
They have kidnapped people.
Like,
they have detained citizens. They have done things unlawfully numerous times. And then even when they find out that they've done things unlawfully, they refuse to remedy those situations. Even when Supreme Court gives them orders, they refuse to remedy those situations.
Tom, do you find it at all embarrassing that I said this is exactly what they said? Your partner was like, hey, give me quotes. I don't think that happened.
I didn't say it didn't happen. I didn't say it didn't happen. I didn't say it didn't happen.
He didn't say it didn't happen.
Oh, wait. Hold on.
I didn't
guess the
say it
quote
didn't
exists,
happen.
But it's fine now.
He didn't say it didn't
No.
happen, but you're supposed to be
So-
giving
so
examples
if
of
we-
some
if
like
we-
horrible things
if
that
we
they're doing when
all
they're just
agree that
stating
it-
facts
if we
now.
all agree
Wait, Tom,
that it
listen to this.
happened-
Ready?
if we
Ready,
all
Tom? You ready to do
agree
this?
that it
I don't want to go
happened,
down this route.
why
I don't
does
want to go
Vince
down
What is
this route.
require me
happening?
to
Wait,
give
Wait,
you
hold
all
on.
the-
Wait, hold on. Wait.
If
Hold
we
on.
all
Wait, I
agree
don't
it
understand what the
happened,
fuck just
why-
happened. He just asked you for names of people who made the statements and gave the quotes. You named them. Then you're
Yeah,
initially
and then
saying
you-
these are horrible things that they're saying. We say, yeah, but they're just stating facts. And you're like, so they are saying it.
Yeah.
They are saying, yes, they're just stating fucking facts.
There
What's the
should-
problem with that?
I think that if I were you, I would be embarrassed to have
Okay.
been part of that interaction. Yeah,
Got it.
because,
You ready for this?
because
You ready for this?
it seems to me like
What
you guys
is
are
the
doing
problem?
the classic,
But
it's not
real quick,
happening, and
I'm
then
gonna-
when I show
I'm
it
gonna go to
happening,
the-
you say,
Nobody
real
said
quick,
it wasn't
I guess it's a
happening.
good thing.
Nobody
Just
said
real
that
quick,
wasn't
real quick.
happening.
I'm gonna hold on.
You're
I'm gonna get
arguing
to
with fucking ghosts.
Let me just get a little housekeeping here. Vince, I'm gonna give it to you here 1 second. Did you, Sean, I want to be respectful of your time. Did you have to leave or do you need an outro?
I got a couple more minutes, and
All right, cool. Go ahead.
Vince had something to say.
All right, real
Yeah,
quick.
just
I
let
want
me-
to.
Yeah.
Who, me or Sean?
No,
you
Vince,
go.
go.
Yeah, whatever you
Okay.
need to do, just let me know.
I want Ryan to. Ryan, I'm gonna do the silly gotcha you try to do. If a politician were to say, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Would you say that was embarrassing?
Does embarrassing interact with the prompt for today's debate in some way?
You see this? It is ridiculous how many times Ryan is a right-wing shill.
I know.
This man is refusing to engage with anything. He
is
gives a
so-
standard
it is
exactly
so
like my statement said, and then he moves
embarrassing that I want
off
to
of it.
debate the prompt. It's just
Yeah, of course you do.
ridiculous.
You don't
You've
want to
asked
answer
tons
for
of
that, do you?
hypotheticals,
So-
Ryan.
so
We've
hold on.
answered your hypotheticals.
Let's
You
say
can't
I
answer a
granted you-
hypothetical?
Vince, again, let's say I granted you that Trump said something terrible. He said something
Well,
terrible.
I guess
How
my
does that
question,
impact
Vince,
the
is what
prompt?
call to action was responded to that? Like, which specific call?
What
action
call to action was responded to? Have you been living in a shell for the past 6 years?
Well, I mean, so
What?
we're living on January 6th, but right now we're dealing with politicians right now who are going on, and now they're meeting violent resistance to government action, calling it terrorism, calling them the Gestapo.
Yeah, and they're also saying be peaceful too, just like Trump said be peaceful in protest. So
Yes,
we're gonna.
no,
Trump-
these are
Trump-
things that are
once again,
fairly
we're not talking
accurate,
about
though, with the
Trump,
shit
like,
that they're
of course we're not
doing.
talking about
JCP were
Trump.
pieces of shit too, isn't it? That's not a winning argument.
Yeah, just like these aren't again when Ryan brings up a bunch of statements and we say those are facts, and then he just I can't believe you're not embarrassed that they're stating facts. Like what is the problem with the list of things that you went off on, Ryan?
I guess let me
The,
try.
the reason it was embarrassing is that Vince obviously didn't think I had the data on hand, which is why he
Oh
called me
my
out
goodness!
on it.
Why are you
I
going
had-
back to
I
this?
had the
Nobody
data,
said that,
and then
Ryan.
you guys
Nobody
just
said
moved-
that.
Then you guys just moved
Stop
on to the next
lying.
thing.
You're
Let me try to
lying.
move
Nobody
Moved on to
said
the
that.
next thing. Don't care.
No,
But everyone
nobody
did.
said,
Hello, let
Ryan,
me-
Ryan, nobody
What is
said
it?
that. You have to get this out of your head. Literally, nobody said that. You're arguing with ghosts. We've gone
Okay,
over this three
so
times
then
now.
we should-
Let me try to bridge the
Tom,
gap though, because
Tom,
this seems
why
like
did he ask the question if it was the information was irrelevant?
Because we're talking about specific quotes. We're talking about specific
Yeah,
people. We want to know
so
what your
why-
examples are that are
So
fitting
why-
your definition
why
that make
ask
this
it unless the
lawless.
things I
Well,
did- what's the point of the question?
no. Well, hold on.
So
hold on.
we
I think
know
there's
what
a-
we're talking about. What do you
Hold on,
mean?
hold
So
on.
we
I
know
think y'all
what we're
doing something
talking
here, though.
about.
But I think what's happening though is there's a missing right now, right? And so part of the reason why I think he's confused and you're confused because he's just stating facts, and like his argument, Ryan, I think is trying to allude to is that okay, yeah, they're facts. However, it's also the secondary like descriptive factor, like the jackbooted thugs, the Gestapo. That's like inciting violence by calling them this specific thing. That's like, they're a Nazi. Like you have to resist these people. Violence is the answer. Like, I think that's kind of I don't know if that's what you, but that seems to be like kind of like the miscommunication here. So when he's saying he lists these people,
But that wasn't true for all of the examples
Sure,
that he
okay,
gave.
yeah,
So
and
for the one that he gave, for the one that he gave from Jeffries, there was no part of that had the secondary implications of it. It was just him stating things that that ICE officers had done, and this is part of his example that we're supposed to be embarrassed of. That he's now pivoting and pretending we're supposed to be embarrassed that we pretended it didn't exist. But
There's endless examples of this, just like there's examples of Democrats downplaying Antifa in general. But the point that I'm making is that you have the prominent leaders in the left creating a permission structure and excusing this conduct. You have local authorities enabling the conduct through their policies and the way they deploy, or more often do not deploy, their local PD. Then you have violent militant thugs on the ground behaving lawlessly, and the whole thing is worse than the sum of its parts. And it leads to lawlessness, which is the point that
Yes,
we were
but
making.
that's why we're asking for specific people and specific quotes, because the ones that you gave us were not that. And on top of that, we can also find a bunch of these same politicians calling for peaceful protests in the same fucking scenarios. So when you act like it's so fucking ridiculous that we would ask for specific examples and what it is
Okay.
that they said, why would you possibly ask
So-
for this if it didn't happen? It's because the examples that you're giving do not fit the scenario that you're trying to shoehorn it into.
Tom,
What
can-
does
if I-
AOC mean by calling them the secret police? Is that just like if they're the secret police, they're the Nazis, the evil bad men, they must be resisted at all costs. That's not, that's not how like secret police are not just defeated by going, I don't like what you're doing. Do you agree, Tom? In that regard?
Yeah, is he frozen for everybody else as well?
I am.
Yes,
Oh,
person, yeah.
you gotta be shitting me with my camera. Sorry.
It's fine.
Okay, I
Tom
was
scared me.
I was
Hold
looking
on.
around. I'm like, who's talking? I'm
Sorry, Tom. Let me fix my camera. He scared me into.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but no. Can you hear me though? Still.
We can hear you.
yes,
you can keep
yeah.
talking.
So I agree that there are like other implications from calling them secret police.
I don't know
but
how many more
I-
implications you can have.
Well, I don't know that it's unfitting in this scenario when it comes to ICE and all of the things that they've done. I don't know that it's not a fitting term.
Well, do you agree calling them the Gestapo? There we go. Like, would you
Do I
agree
agree
with
with
that being
what?
problematic?
I
mean, like some of the worst,
to an extent,
the
I can
Gestapo's,
understand.
like
What,
the worst fucking people in history, like literal fucking Nazis, and you're like, if they're really the Gestapo, like, I mean, like there really aren't very many options to deal with Gestapo other than tooling up because they're the Gestapo.
yeah,
I
I mean,
mean, like-
I can understand that there's definitely other implications in that I think that could push people over the edge. But I also think that at some point, like the majority of the people who are going out there are not being violent. We already agree that like Antifa in and of themselves is kind of a violent resistance. So whatever it is that they're doing, they're already resisting in generally a violent way. They're not supported by Democrats systemically. They're not supported by Democrats within the like political infrastructure. And I don't think that the majority of Democrats are out here thinking that they need to be violent against the ICE. But I do think that they think they need to resist them. And I think that they do think that this is a lawless group of people who are going out and doing illegal things on behalf of the Trump administration to put on a show for television.
Well, the conservatives. Let me just ask all y'all. So let's say the conservatives, because here's a group that we could be analogous to. If the conservatives were going around calling Antifa the brown shirts, right? That would be basically them calling the Nazis, right? Like, but because they were the same thing. The brown shirts were like unorganized at first. They were kind of the group that did all the exact same things for the Nazis. Like, would you see the issue if like conservatives were doing that? I guess is that like,
Yes, I've already admitted this, but when you were talking about people who are literally wearing like face covers over their faces to where nobody can see them, we're talking about people who have over and over and over violated people's Fourth Amendment rights. We're talking about people who have consistently detained people unlawfully, who have used excessive force over and over and over, and have even killed 2 citizens now. I don't think that these are like insane things to jump to. While it might be a little hyperbolic, I would love to hear how this is so fucking ridiculous
Tom,
to call them
are
the
you- I
I
Gestapo
actually think
or
that's a
secret
good point
police.
that he's making.
Are you arguing that it's not lawless or that it's lawless and justified? It sounds like you're arguing it's lawless and justified.
What to call them secret police? I don't think it's lawless to call them the Gestapo.
No,
or
I'm
the
talking about the
secret police.
broader statement you made, that the need to resist ICE, which I assume includes the broader resisting of ICE, which is statements made by politicians,
I'm saying
protests,
that
and yes,
ICE is.
Antifa.
I'm saying like ICE is lawless and unjustified, and I think that it is right
Okay.
for people to stand up to them.
So when Antifa acts against the way that they act, you would agree that's lawless, but you think it's justified.
Well, it depends on the way that they're acting. No, I don't agree that they should be using like physical force against people and injuring
Okay.
injuring officers.
But you
I
agree
do think that
it's lawless.
It depends on what we're talking about. Like in general, there are lawless things that come from people that we call
when they build
Antifa.
anti-tank barriers and deploy them outside of federal facilities called hedgehogs in order to impede law enforcement officers from leaving the building. Is that lawless?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. When they engage in training regimes to create shields and then train to find the weakest federal officer and clobber them with shields during protests, is that lawless?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. When they
Mitch, you're
create
muted.
supply chains to flip
Mitch,
over
you're muted.
trucks and create barricades to prevent officers from moving around, is that lawless?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, when
It's
they
against the
stalk
law, yeah.
federal officers and create a database of license plates so that they can follow the federal officers around the country and stalk them, which is what they're part of what they're charged with in Minnesota. Is that lawless?
Sure. But I think
Okay, so there's
the
a lot of
question here
lawlessness here is my point.
is well, sure. I don't know honestly, because if I see somebody who comes in and let's say it's like an officer who just starts like raping a woman, and I run over and I start beating him up and start trying to stop him in that moment. Obviously, this is like in a scenario where there is like a direct harm to somebody in that moment to where I'm engaging in self-defense. That's not technically the case here, where it's more a broader sense of defense of the country or a broader sense of engagement against ICE and ICE facilities. But I think that when other people are committing crimes over and over and over, and again, I don't think that it is like AOC calling them the secret police that's making people go out and do all of those things. I think it's the things that ICE is doing that is getting people to go out and do those things. I don't think it's the fault of somebody calling them the Gestapo. I don't think that's the thing where they hear, oh, they murdered a couple of citizens. They just killed another one on Monday. And now it's only if somebody calls them the Gestapo will I find this bad enough for me to go out and do something about it. I don't think that there's the larger systemic structure that you're talking about that is actually getting them to go do these things.
My question
I-
was, is Antifa's actions lawless even if you think they're justified?
Yes. Did you hear the last
so
thing that I just said? Did you hear the last thing that I just said?
It doesn't. The thing you last said doesn't matter to the prompt. So I'm trying to focus on the thing that matters to the prompt.
And I'm sure
it
we
does,
can sit
because
here.
if all we're
Wait, I got a question here. I got a question.
Hold on, just one more thing. If all we're doing is looking at like people committing crimes and whether or not they're on the right or the left, if all I do is just go and look at the state with the most crimes, it's Alaska. If I go look at it, which is a Republican state, if I go look at the states with the top 10 states with the most crimes, 7 out of 10 of them are Republican. If I go look at the past 5 Republican administrations, I get over 400 indictments within those Republican administrations and 3 from Democrat administrations. If I'm going to looking at like broader swaths of systemic corruption and systemic criminality, lawlessness even from these administrations, that is like from top leaders, when we're talking about these things being systemic, I'm going to have way more examples of way more political murders from the right, way more political crimes from the right, way more right-wing states having way more crimes. I'm going to have a lot more from right-wingers if all I'm doing is pointing at there's a correlation between being on the right and committing crimes, but I wouldn't do that because I'm pointing at systemic structures top down, not just random people at the bottom.
Tom, if I granted all of that, it would have nothing to do with this prompt. If you want to have a conversation about the right at some point, we can have one. But the prompt
What was the point of what I just said? No, Ryan, what was the point of what I just said? What was the point of what I just said?
The point was you had a long diatribe about doing both sidisms that don't matter, and then you.
No, I did. No.
If you're going to ask me a question, Tom,
this is absolutely insane. What the point that I made? Hold on. No. The point. Wait. The point that I made. Don't respond to something if you misunderstood it. You want to just to be clear. You want to respond to me while knowing you misunderstood me, right? Yes. You're saying you want to respond to something you misunderstood. Yes. There wasn't a question. I didn't ask you a question. I didn't ask you a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Let's let you get out of here. Then
it's actually like 9:30. I gotta go right now.
Go ahead.
Do you have time to do parting shots, or you just gotta bail?
No, like I only got like 30 seconds.
Yeah, give me an outro, and then we'll.
Sean, I know you had a hard out. Sorry about that, man.
No, it's all right. And I don't mean to interrupt Ryan and Tom here.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
So you guys all have a great night. Nice meeting you, Ryan. Nice meeting you, Vince. Or sorry, Ryan, Tom, Vince. Nice meeting you guys.
You're good.
Nice
You
meeting
guys
you.
have a nice night.
Later, man.
There we go.
See you, Sean.
So, before we get back to y'all completely, though, I do have a question, right? So, I want to come back to what Tom just said because I think it actually is a good point. So, Tom was saying, okay, the reason why it's not the same is because if they lock people away that shouldn't be locked away, calling them toot toot magoo or whatever is going to be an accurate assessment. Is it just bad because they're called Nazis? Is it bad because you call them certain different police forces throughout history that are evil, or is it bad to make this implication when it seems like it's a reasonable jump for someone that is on the left? Because that seems kind of be what you're arguing a little bit, when you're saying this is a systemic thing from the language point of view.
Well, it's not merely that. My argument was that if you look at the ground level, you see lawless, violent behavior, which is obvious in Antifa. It's obvious with Charlie Kirk. It's obvious with the assassination attempts. It's obvious with the ICE agent that got shot in Texas. Then you look at local politicians and you see them not providing assistance, purposefully withholding assistance in many cases, and yes, in some cases, as in New Jersey, themselves engaging in violence. And the mayor was arrested for assaulting an ICE officer, as was I believe a congressperson. I might be switching up their roles, so forgive me if I got the detail wrong. And then you see national leadership downplaying it, using inflammatory language, calling them the Gestapo and jackbooted thugs and kidnappers, et cetera, in the way that we've all heard the rhetoric displayed. And I think that what I'm saying is, if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, you can see how the broader left is creating a permission structure for this violence when there are alternatives to that this could have been done in different ways.
So I want to
the argument.
I want to mention this, okay? I want everybody to pay attention to what just happened. There's a bunch of darts all over the board. And if they were and this is why it's important, okay? Because when we talk about lawlessness, and exactly how I described it, is there's a chain of custody, if you will, I guess, on how we define lawlessness. Ryan just said, here's point A of radical left politicians saying ICE is crazy. Here's another dot in another different city of a lawless actor. And here's another dot of the board from a different time with another president. And he wants you to believe that all of these are somehow interconnected. But why do they have to be interconnected? Because that's how you define lawlessness. For example, if we were to have, and I'll give you a good, clear example of how lawlessness would work. You could have, in theory, a Democratic, Freudian slip of J6, Democratic politician as a mayor saying ICE is the thugs, they need to be booted out, then takes to the street, then participates in the riot. And then when it comes to actually charging those individuals, that then mayor goes, no, don't charge them. We're not going to charge them. In fact, we're going to give them medals and we're going to give them every bit of resource that we possibly can. And we're going to that is the chain of events. But notice what Ryan had to do to get you to be convinced that the left is lawless. He had to take a bunch of little dots from a bunch of different little areas and say that this connection somehow defines lawlessness. And why Tom and me have pointed relentlessly at the right is because we have a consistent chain of custody where someone is pissed off Donald Trump, seditious six. Then he calls for them to be prosecuted, goes forward with them being prosecuted towards a grand jury, and even says that their crime should be guilty of treason. And I'm not even going to name what the punishment ought to have been because that's what Donald Trump said himself on Truth Social. That's lawlessness. That's lawlessness. Mm-hmm. Sitting here saying that this random mayor with this random Antifa person with this random Joe Biden in the Oval Office, you can't even connect the dots like I just did with Trump.
So what you're doing is the classic leftist move of saying that because the left tends to be decentralized, they cannot do anything bad. Because the left is decentralized, they're blameless, and we can never open our eyes and look around and see the very, very obvious things. Like some people might be, they might wonder, they might go back to the summer of love and BLM and say, when they were sieging that courthouse for 100 days. How was that responded to? Was it met with swift law enforcement?
Yes.
Or what? Or no, that's why it lasted 100 days. Or what?
How many arrests were made?
Or Was this the sort of thing where Kamala Harris was advocating that we all
Here we go with
contribute
dots on the board
to a
again,
ba-
guys. Pay
to a
attention
ba-
to it.
to a bail fund so that the people who were ultimately arrested can walk free?
What was the Kamala
Thank
Harris bail
God.
fund thing? What
Thank
was the
God.
Kamala Harris? First of all, another dot on the board. But what was that Kamala Harris bail fund thing? Can you elaborate what happened there?
Yeah, she promoted a bail fund called the Minnesota Freedom
How does she promote
Fund.
for it?
I believe she had public statements in favor of it, asking for people
Wrong.
to donate. if
She
I
actually
recall.
she reposted a tweet. That's it.
She retweeted.
She retweeted it.
She quote tweeted something.
Sorry,
and said that she
is
wanted
a
to help
tweet not a
peaceful
public
protesters.
statement?
Well, she
No.
wanted to, she said that she wanted to help get peaceful protesters out because it was true, and we do know now, as it was reported on at the time, that they were just rounding up everybody who was there and then going through deciding who was violent and who wasn't, and letting them out after a couple of days. Sometimes they had to get to their 72 before they could actually get let out, and so they were trying to bond people out so that they didn't have to wait until they're 72.
So the thing that I said happened, but you think it's a good thing?
No, you said she came out in public
She
support and
made
put out a
public-
statement.
I said she made a public statement.
Oh, here we go. Where's the statement?
Sure, but
What's the statement?
when you
Sorry,
say it's a, hold on, wait, no,
posting is
hold
not
on,
a
wait.
public
Is it when
statement?
you
I
say
don't
it's a good
understand.
thing?
Here's the
It's when
backtrack.
she's saying peaceful protesters, and she specifies peaceful protesters in the post, and you're sitting here saying that this is an example of lawlessness. Well, I don't think that trying to bond people out or wanting to help peaceful protesters is an example of lawlessness. Even if it's just she wouldn't made the statement on the news, it wouldn't be an
And since we
example
love
of this.
words so much, she actually said we must always defend peaceful protests. We should not confuse them with those looting and committing acts of violence. Does that sound like she's promoting lawlessness there, Ryan?
So when Trump said that everyone at J6 should go to the Capitol building peacefully and patriotically, that means that he did nothing wrong because he said the magic word peacefully?
Do you think that means that he did something peacefully?
Well, I know that you guys are incensed about the things
I'm
he
asking
said
you,
on
Ryan.
January
You're
6th.
posting it on me. I'm curious on your position.
What I'm asking
Not mine.
you
I'm curious about your
is
position.
if we can make the obvious inference
He's not going to
that
answer
I've
it.
had to
He's
have
not going to
in
answer it
every
because he thought he was going to
debate
get a gotcha
for
until
a
you turn it back
mil-
around
for
on
a
him.
million years, that just because someone says the word peaceful to describe something that is not peaceful does not make it so. People called the BLM Summer of Love peaceful. It was the most destructive set of riots in American history, as I recall. So
How many
just
arrests were made?
calling it peaceful does not make it so.
How many arrests were made?
Why does it matter?
Because that would debunk your point that it was lawless. They actually were enforcing the law.
Yes,
there was
if
over
Democrats are
16,000
enforcing
arrests.
the law.
There were
It's the- like, the
16,000
point that we
arrests,
keep- hold on,
2,000
the-
felony arrests.
The point that we keep coming back to is that there is not this systemic structure on the left that permits lawlessness as there is on the right. And so as we're saying is that we keep asking for examples of these things because you're just pointing out random people who are on the left who are committing crimes or doing something that you deem to be lawless and then saying, therefore, the left is lawless.
Well,
and we're
really,
saying there
the-
is
the-
no
the-
systemic structure
sorry, so
here that makes that a
structure
characteristic of the left.
The structure that I pointed out is that Democratic politicians are targeting ICE with inflammatory rhetoric and creating permission structure. Local politicians are refusing to send police for long periods of time, making conflicts worse, whereas the politicians are calling for more people to show up and protest, and then Antifa uses that as the shield for their violent activities. But if you guys don't like this example, we can go to other examples.
Well, no,
This is not
I'm
the
curious.
only one I have. I have more that we can talk about.
Gibbs, I have a question. Can I just ask this one question real
Yeah,
quick?
go ahead.
Let me just ask this one question. I promise, and I'll be quiet for a little bit, okay?
No, you're good. No, you're good.
I'm very confused on how someone can say that the ICE is the Gestapo, and that is somehow a point to where they are saying that is lawlessness, but yet the opposite can't be calls for peace. So I'm a little confused on this. Like, how can one be an act of, like, if you're saying, like, I'm confused on this. I'm confused. Maybe you can enlighten me. I just need some help on that.
Okay, so you seem you're confused by the idea that when Democratic politicians call for resisting, I think it's the word Tom used earlier, ICE. And then people, in fact, do resist ICE, and it often becomes violent, and local government does not help in the way that they should. That doesn't strike you. That's random darts. There's no way that any of that is connected.
I have explained. I'm sorry, Gibbs. Do you want to go ahead? Okay. I just want to say this real quick. I have already elaborated, and I will say it again and again. I don't think that words in and of themselves are necessarily proof of any lawlessness. You have a right in this country to say damn near anything that you'd want to say, just like when Donald Trump said fight like hell. Now, what has been done and since the day of J6 is that there's been investigations to try to draw connections between Donald Trump and those on J6. I would even argue, and maybe this is a hot thing to admit, I don't know if I would even necessarily go as far as saying that Donald Trump saying fight like hell in and of itself is lawlessness. What happens is what's preceding it. And I've already given you a great example, which you've not addressed, and I will say it again, which is we can look at what Donald Trump has done and where he has sat there and publicly called out those senators, the seditious six, right, as it is called. And he has then taken action upon that speech to go and actually prosecute them. That is an example of lawlessness. It can be a pillar in which we define lawlessness, but I don't think speech inherently in and of itself is an example.
Well, how is initiating a prosecution or an investigation lawlessness? It might be tyrannical, but I don't think it could be lawless.
Wait, I want to be very clear here. You then are saying, are you saying that you support Donald Trump going after the seditious six?
I really
don't think that's lawlessness?
I need you to be more careful with your words and to try to understand what I'm saying. Lawlessness and tyrannical are different things. The government starting an investigation or initiating a prosecution is not inherently lawless, even if they're wrong. It could be tyrannical. It could be the government misusing power in a way that's tyrannical, but the government initiating a prosecution is not lawless. They're allowed to do it.
Let me give an example. Actually, this is perfect. This is a perfect segue into kind of what I wanted, what I really wanted this to be about, right? So and I'm gonna just pretend like I'm gonna give you like an argument I've heard, and I think Ryan's probably gonna kind of agree with this, since he seems to be like tap dancing around a little bit. So the argument is that there's like a system, right? And an example of this is the prosecution itself might not be illegal, right? You look at the Trump prosecution in New York, right? And from what I understand, they basically extended statute of limitations, right? So the argument is you have a group of people that are willing to either bend the law to where the law is lawful, and then they've established this system of like giving money out to these programs that then feed it back in the NGOs. You have this systemic thing that they've put in place, and then it's being oppressive, right? That's kind of the argument that I'm hearing. And like I don't know. He's the lawyer here. He can tell you if that's an accurate assessment of what has happened with the lawfare with the New York case. But that seems to be like an argument that many on the right are trying to make with this.
Yeah,
and,
like in the Eugene Carroll case. Her claims were extinguished because the limitations period had expired. New York passed a law that she was part of the lobbying effort for that gave her a 1-year window, amongst with others, people who were had certain sexually related civil torts, to bring claims that would otherwise be blocked by the statute of limitations. And then she sued Trump. That's not lawless, right? You might criticize it for being like tyrannical or targeting Trump or unfair or biased. You can make criticisms of it, but it's not lawless. I wouldn't call that lawless because they operated within the bounds of the law.
Hey, guess what? I need you to listen. I would agree. Hey, Tom, what have I said about lawlessness? What is it? It is a combination, as you yourself have kind of done inadvertently, and maybe you didn't realize it, is that it requires a set of actions. It requires steps. So prosecutions, not necessarily in and of themselves lawlessness. Words, not necessarily lawlessness. And I'm glad we can agree that there are certain factors of this that are not necessarily lawlessness. And I don't know if you just realized what you just did. You also just kind of somewhat acknowledged that words cannot be lawless, right? Because again, now, unless you have what you need, which is what you've said, which is an action after that. And yes, it is a combination of the three in which I have laid out already with Donald Trump, who has publicly gone after those. And I would argue and dare say that you would agree with me then that the FBI going after Donald Trump and making the statements that they made, or Jack Smith, which is I know something that you would probably love to engage with on that, would be lawlessness or tyranny, even maybe. But again, lawlessness has a combination. It's not something that is just one action. It's a combination of actions of a particular actor, or in this case, we're talking about the left. And I understand what you're saying is that it's decentralized. But the problem is on that is that you're not connecting the dots. You're throwing pins at a dartboard and saying, look, here's the string here, here's the string here, here's the string here. I'm giving you how that's not lawlessness. That's a bunch of random people on a board. Whereas Donald Trump explicitly drew a straight line.
It's, since like, look, and people are going to watch this, they can decide whether the inference I drew is a fair one. I'm not trying to convince you of it, but what about something more obvious, like ignoring a Supreme Court order? Would that be lawless?
Ignoring a Supreme Court order?
Yeah.
Again, here we go with the dumb gotchas. I'm going to guess. Hold on, let me take a guess. You're going to bring up Biden. Is that it?
No.
Tom, I think we go. Okay, who are we going with? Trump? Because I'm kind of with Trump. Yeah, I know Trump's there.
Okay.
What you want from me, I'm not going to give you.
I'm trying to get agreement on what
you're trying to get a gotcha.
Of
no, you're not.
Would
That's
be.
being disingenuous.
So then
Don't even start that with me.
I give you an example of the left doing it. You are correct, because the left does do it.
So you're doing a gotcha. You're being disingenuous right now.
I'm not being disingenuous. I'm telling you what I'm doing. Do you agree that ignoring a Supreme Court order would be lawless?
Ignoring a Supreme Court order, yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Generally speaking.
So in the case,
here it comes.
In the case DHS v. DVD, a district court judge disagreed with the ruling because this had to do tangentially with birthright citizenship of the Supreme Court, and just ignored the court. And when they ignored the court, it went back up because the government appealed again and said, why are they ignoring the court? And God bless her, because she is the left-leaning justice with the most integrity. Justice Kagan left Sotomayor and Jackson and said in her concurrence that while she disagrees with the majority's ruling, disagreeing with the majority is not a basis for the lower court to ignore a Supreme Court order because they disagree with the politics.
Gotcha. So Ryan, I want to be very clear. I want you on the record. So do you agree that ignoring a Supreme Court order is lawlessness?
Yeah, I think you have to follow Supreme Court orders.
So what do you think about Donald Trump and Abrego Garcia? What do you think about that one? What about the funding for colleges, I believe it was?
Well, let's do one at a time. What was the Supreme Court order regarding Abrego Garcia?
That he had to bring back Abrego Garcia, because I was talking about E.G.
Yeah,
Harris.
facilitate his return.
That was not the order. No, what was the order?
It was that they had to facilitate his return.
And did they facilitate the return?
Holy shit, you're doing the Andrew.
Almost 3 months later.
Okay.
Yes.
Almost 3 months later.
Ignored the Supreme Court.
Did they facilitate the return?
After they said numerous times that they were not going to. They did say over and over and over. Donald Trump said it. Pam Bondi said it.
To be clear,
Stephen Miller said it. All of these people said
the return, and then they facilitated the return.
What about the injunctions?
Would you say after refusing to do it? Wait.
Sorry,
after refusing to do it, after they said they were going to refuse to do it, and after waiting numerous months to do it, that is not abiding by a Supreme Court order when you do it whenever you feel like.
They didn't have to do it by a specific time. They were told to facilitate, and they did.
Did they say?
Now,
did they say they were refusing to do it? Did they say they were refusing to do it? They did. Yes.
The original order, the one that the district court sent to the Supreme Court, do you remember what that said?
Did they say that they were refusing to do it?
And facilitate. It said expedite and facilitate. The Supreme Court struck down the word expedite. Do you know why?
Because they couldn't tell them how they couldn't tell them when to do it.
Because the Supreme Court lacks the authority to order the president to engage in foreign relations under our Constitution.
Right.
So the court was being extraordinarily careful not to exceed their authorities. Sorry, I think it's been told.
Got it. So what's being said here?
So they did refuse to. They did say over and over that they were refusing.
Did it?
That's not what I asked. That's not what I asked. That's not what I asked. They did say over and over they were refusing to abide by the Supreme Court order. Yes.
So what?
He's not.
Wait, so what? You
That's a
just
yes.
made your own.
So that's a yes.
So what?
So that's a yes. So that's a yes.
I don't recall. I'll take your word for it. So what? Let's assume it's true. So what? They did it. They were ordered to do it. They did it. So what?
Okay, so you know what this sounds like? This is like I go in, I steal
just
a
to be
candy
clear,
bar.
I
but
just
you know
I
what,
do
guys?
want to say
This is ridiculous.
They did add in there that for every day or for every minute that he goes still in CCOT, that this was a miscarriage of justice, I believe is the term that they used. And so
who said that?
this was, I want to say it was Sotomayor, or wait. Yeah, the only person, so they had one overall opinion, and then they had one that was given an extra writing at the bottom as a concurrence, and I believe it was Sotomayor who wrote that.
So then that was not the order.
Correct.
That was,
yes,
that was part of the concurrence.
I think
not
we
the
all
order.
agree that yes, but they did over and over state that they were not going to abide by the Supreme Court order, that they didn't have to.
Hey, so
and
what?
even Trump was asked, what do you mean, so what? The idea that you're given an order that you illegally did something and you're choosing to ignore it until it's convenient, until you've come up with a reason to make it convenient to bring him back, which was to charge him with other crimes that have been dropped now because they were obviously fallacious. The fact that they sat on it for as long as possible because they were purposefully engaging in persecution of this individual is tyrannical, I would think.
So, well, now we were talking about lawlessness. The question was, is it lawless to ignore a Supreme Court order? They did not ignore the Supreme Court order. They complied with the Supreme Court order. So what?
Oh my
goodness.
goodness.
So what? They said, like, if a court ordered me to pay you damages, let's say you sued me and I lost a case, and then I
said,
said,
going to keep ignoring what we're saying and just repeating that, then this is pointless.
I'm not doing it. Fuck the court. I'm not doing it. But then I actually pay you. I didn't disobey the court. I obeyed the court, and I said some stuff in the interim. Like, the question here is, did they disobey the court? The answer is they did not. They followed the court order. So what are you talking about?
Wait, can you tell me then? Okay, to your earlier point that started this whole this segue here.
I'd like Tom to answer before we get off.
Of course you would.
What are you talking about?
I've already answered it numerous times. You keep ignoring what it is we're saying and pivoting back to this. So what? We've answered it over and over and over. You're not engaging. You're running from what it is that we've said over and over and over. Do it again. Do it again. Pivot again. Go ahead. No, go ahead again. Do it again. Do it again. Let's do this again. Merry-go-round.
Money, and then I paid you the money, but I said, fuck this court. I'm not doing it in the interim. Did I follow the court order?
If you went numerous days refusing to abide by that order, and then 2 months later, then you abide by the order, sure, at some point you abided by the order.
Okay.
You went 2 to 3 months refusing to abide by the order.
Was there a time limit in the order?
Not that I recall, but I don't think that makes a difference.
Did the Supreme Court expressly remove the implication of a time limit?
Wow.
I do think there was an implication of
none
it.
of this grace would ever be given to the
implication.
left, as he exhibited at the very, very beginning of this entire thing when he said that the left somehow ignored a Supreme Court order. Where's that same grace to the left there, Ryan?
Because the judge
they eventually complied. I don't know of any leftist that explicitly ignored the Supreme Court.
The judge received a Supreme Court order, ignored it, and then was reprimanded by the Supreme Court plus Kagan for ignoring the Supreme Court order that came down previously.
Which judge are you talking about? So I don't know what you're talking about. Which judge are you talking about?
It's called DHS v. DVD. You can look it up. There's two orders. Let me see if I have the date.
I guess
it was July and June of 2025. The case was DHS v. DV. Sorry, I cut you off, Gibbs. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just like, okay, so I guess let me just go down the logic here real quick. So just for funsies here, I guess I kind of want to hear, Tom, what is your point? Let's just say that he acquiesced to your point. What is the point you're trying to make, Tom? Just out of curiosity, because I'm kind of curious to see where it goes. Where are you going with this? Like, let's just say you get the admission you want there. What are you going?
But I don't think that you get to wash away all of the time that you refuse to abide by a court order, that you explicitly stated that you were refusing to abide by a court order, just because you ended up doing it 3 months later when it was convenient. I don't think that erases the entire period that you continuously refused to abide by a court order and admitted in numerous interviews that you were refusing. You had your Stephen Miller say that you guys were refusing. Pam Bondi said that they were refusing. Caroline Levitt said that they were refusing. J.D. Vance said that they were refusing. Literally everybody part of the administration, including Trump, in numerous interviews said that they were refusing to abide by the court order and did so for months and then eventually brought him back. It seemed like the intent for the longest period was that they were just going to ignore it and do their own thing. And then eventually they found a reason to bring him back to try to charge him with another crime.
And this is why I was asking if there was a time limit, because if the court said, if you were ordered, for example, in my example about me being ordered to pay you money, if the court said I have to pay you by the 15th, and then I didn't pay you by the 15th while talking a lot of shit, then I ignored the court's order. But if
this is the most bad faith fucking bullshit. If they brought him back in 30 years, you would still be saying the same thing. They could do it 30 years later.
I let you answer the question. You can at least give me the same courtesy.
Yeah, and then I have a question for you afterwards, Ryan. Go ahead.
There is no time limit in the order, and the court expressly removed even the implication of a time limit, and then you do in fact follow the order, then you did not ignore the order, you followed the order.
Okay, so I guess my question is back to your first example when you brought this to them before Vince retorted with this example, right? In your example, there was no. I guess the time is the major differentiating factor. Is that kind of what you're arguing here?
I'm not sure I follow what you're saying, and who are you asking? I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
Yes, he is saying that the time limit is the factor, but the question is, if they did it 30
if he's
years
asking
later,
me a question,
would you
can I
still be
answer
saying
the
this?
question?
Yeah.
So the lower court ordered that. I think that I'm trying to get the wording right from memory. The lower court ordered that the Trump administration effectuate and facilitate the return of Garcia. The Supreme Court struck the word effectuate because they recognized that they lack the power to order the federal government, the executive, to enter into negotiations with a foreign state, leaving only facilitate. They just said facilitate his return, and there was no time limit on the order. Right. Then the government, I agree, talked a bunch of shit, and then they facilitated his return. So they did not, in fact, disobey the court. They obeyed the court. They did what the court said, even though technically speaking, the court might have lacked authority to even order them to do that.
No, I understand that. Okay, so but that's not what my question is. My question is, okay, so
sorry, kids, I thought that was the question. My bad.
Yeah, right. So my point here is, right, okay, this example that Vince has brought up, you're saying they did follow it eventually, yada yada. The time, there's no time limit specified. That's your excuse to Vince, right? That's your thing. Your example to Vince the first time, though, when you're originally asking this question, was what? What is the like? What was? Do you remember?
He's referring to the Department of Homeland Security versus DVD, which I just looked at it. It looks like which is ironic because it's referring to a DHS injunction that Donald Trump himself ignored. But we're not going to talk about injunctions because we don't.
So I guess that's where I'm going here is like I'm just trying to understand like what the because I guess y'all all agree that if you don't follow a Supreme Court order, it's like lawless, right? However, it's like I guess we're getting lost in well, if they follow it eventually, like if you come down to Texas and tell us you're not going to do one thing, and then they bring the guns down, yeah, eventually we followed it. So I guess where is the line where it's we're actively fighting it versus it's just words? I guess what I'm trying to figure out.
I'll go to Justice Kagan in DHS v. DVD. She said, I voted to deny the government's previous stay application in this case, and I continue to believe that this court should not have stayed the district court's order because she was in the minority. She agreed with the district court. The majority stayed the district court's order, enjoining the government from deporting non-citizens to third countries without notice or meaningful opportunity to be heard. She was in the dissent. She's flagging. She thinks that's the right call legally. But she continues. But a majority of this court, the Supreme Court, saw things differently, and I do not see how a district court can compel compliance with an order that this court has stayed. The issue was the district court had an order, the Supreme Court stayed that order, and the district court said, nah, even though the Supreme Court stayed the order, I want to enforce it anyway. And this is Justice Kagan joining with the conservative majority to say, you can't do that, lower court. You can't just ignore Supreme Court orders because you're a lower court. That's why I brought the example up, because it's a clear example of ignoring a Supreme Court order because the judge did the opposite of what the Supreme Court had ordered.
What does she grant? Because I'm
it's
looking at the very
really
tail end of
weird.
it. It looks
Hold
like
on.
she
It's just I don't even understand like why we're like we're talking about a judge, and because the judge is against somebody on the left, that this is now again an example of just somebody on the left. He's brought this up like 20 times now, is when you're just throwing things at a dartboard, you have a bunch of different points that you're pointing at. You're just saying, here's a person on the left that did something, here's a person on the left that did something, here's a person on the left that did something, here's a person on the left that did something. And as we've continuously asked, when I gave the examples of Alaska and all of these states, when I gave the examples of all the Republican administrations, when I gave all of these different examples, you said that I was doing a whataboutism, when in reality, I was giving examples of where there are systemic institutions in place that are criminal or lawless, or even sometimes tyrannical in some cases, but mostly lawless. And that if without any of these institutions, without any of these systemic examples, you're just showing us that people on the left commit crimes sometimes, which is a nonsensical point.
So I gave, the first example I gave was the broader trend regarding ICE and Antifa. Then, since we moved off that example, I am now going into a broader trend of the judiciary on the left ignoring the law for political reasons. And this was the first example I could give in that regard. I could give more, but is there a way for me to prove, to show to you that judges on the left are ignoring the law, other than to give you examples of judges on the left ignoring the law?
I reject
How else
judges
would I do
being
that?
examples of the left.
Wait, hold on. Tom, can you answer one question for me? You mentioned that the crime stat, though. I don't know about Alaska, but I just looked up just out of curiosity when you said that the top 10 most crime cities, and I think 9 out of 10 of them, or 8 out of 10 of them are Democrat. So
Sure.
either it's a Republican state, if it's a Democrat city, wouldn't that go?
Sure,
against
I'm
it
not
like
making
that?
the argument that they
Sure,
are
I'm just
lawless.
curious.
I'm trying to give examples of the fact that we are not even having a conversation about systemic, top-down, left or right institutions.
Well,
so yes, I
that's
agree that
something I wanna
the
talk about,
crime,
as well.
the cities, but this is what we've
system
gone
part of
back
this
to
is what I wanna talk
20
about.
fucking times, and he ignores it every time and starts pointing out small examples here and there. I completely reject that judges are somehow representative of the left. These are not democratically elected individuals. These are not people that are leaders
Well,
on
some
the
of them
left.
are.
These are not
Whoa.
people. So
Some of them are, but I guess, Tom, this is what
district court judges are. District court judges are.
In Texas, we elect our judges, but I just want to throw.
Gibbs, hold on. So Tom, you don't think we have a conservative Supreme Court right now?
We do.
Well, then how come these judges can be left or right, Tom? How come the Supreme Court can be conservative?
That's not what I said. I didn't say that they're not left or right. I didn't say they're not left or right.
What do you think what do you think a conservative or liberal justice is? I can't believe you're making this argument. I'm surprised that an attorney is making this argument. What is a conservative and liberal justice?
I'm surprised that Tom is making the argument.
Hold on. No, I didn't make. Hold on. Wait. No. Hold on. Wait. I didn't make this argument. I did not make this argument. First off, I said. I never said that they're not conservative or liberal. I never said that. I said they are not representative of the left. They are not leaders on the left. They are not people who are democratically elected. These are not people who are leaders who are giving orders out to people. These are not leaders of the left. You're just pointing to random people on the left doing things. Who?
This is the problem I have. This is the problem I have is that Ryan's being. I can't believe an attorney would make this argument that because somebody was appointed by the right or somebody was appointed by the left, that somehow the Supreme Court justice is a conservative or liberal. That is such an elementary level of understanding, because I know, and this is what, real quick, I know that this is, Ryan knows this, and that's why he's not answering it, because a conservative and a liberal justice does not mean that they're conservative in the sense of political movement. It doesn't mean they're liberal in the sense of a political movement because they're appointed by the left or the right. It depends on how they interpret the Constitution, what the reading is of it. Are they conservative with it? Or are they liberal with it? Not in the sense of the right or left like it's a political movement. And you know that, Ryan.
Okay, so that being the case, I assume you oppose.
It's not being, it is.
That being the case, I assume you oppose the growing
Why are you not
calls
answering that?
on the left to pack the U.S. Supreme Court?
Because you're being disingenuous. This proves he's being disingenuous
Vince,
right here. This proves it because he knows the difference between a conservative and a liberal justice. And he tried to frame it as it was left or right.
It doesn't matter. They're not representative of the left.
I assume you condemn the calls on the left to pack the U.S. Supreme Court, right?
It doesn't matter. They're not representative of the left. That's the point. That they're not representative. These are not people who are.
The Supreme Court aren't representative of the left. Tom, who the fuck
No.
is
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
Representative of the left.
Politicians.
Okay. I've given you examples that include politicians. I've given you examples that include judges. I've given you examples of grassroots things. I've given you examples across the spectrum, but none of them are good enough for you. So the question I'm asking is, at a certain point, if it's just going to be that no number of examples is good enough for you, no set of facts.
That's crazy that the person who comes in disagreeing with you would fucking disagree with you during the debate. That's
but you haven't disagreed.
No way.
You haven't disagreed with me.
I have disagreed with you. I have disagreed with you. You brought up numerous examples of politicians.
You just say it's fine. You don't seem to care.
No. When we went over examples of politicians, we went over them, I said these are not examples of lawlessness. These are not examples of them calling for lawlessness. These are not examples of them doing anything wrong. We went over these one by one. Now for you to go back to it like, oh, well, you don't care about those. Either way, even if that was the case, it still would not make district court judges representative of the left. There's no fucking way you would agree with that for conservatives. That if I point at conservative decisions, this is representative of the right.
You don't think Justice Jackson is representative of the left?
Is Justice Jackson a district court judge?
No.
Yeah.
She is. It's fucking crazy, isn't it? I've said district court judges every fucking time, and he ignores everything that I say, and then just comes up with some other bullshit fucking argument.
Let me just try to bridge the gap here because I think once again, I kind of say the argument, like I said, I keep coming back to this, is that it's like a system, right? And the first argument is like, why are some of the people that hate Trump for the first term hate him now? Like Bolton's a good example, right? And the argument a lot of people say is, oh, well, Trump had to use what was there and get some people in and then got it later, right? And come back, right? And so the argument is, oh, these lower court justices and these lower court officials, the post office people, the people in these like bureaucratic jobs, like this is this system that's corrupt and it's working against them. And like that's kind of the inference I think that Brian's trying to make here when he's pointing to all these different like things. And it seems sanctioned by the national party, because the one thing will happen and then a politician, a national figure will comment on it the riots are happening. They're like, oh, let's do the bail funds.
Hold on, Gibbs, you're making an argument for him. He never made that argument. He never made that argument ever.
Okay. Yeah, because that's the argument that I was hoping to talk about when we got here.
That's what I've been asking him to make this entire time.
A very simple
ask. That's what I'm doing now, so then y'all can fight.
We started with a very simple ask, which is, would it be lawless to ignore a Supreme Court order? The answer is obviously yes. I gave an example of an Obama-appointed district court judge who did exactly that. Biden, you don't seem to care about that particular example, so let's go on to the next one. What about Judge Dugan? When Judge Dugan took illegal immigrants and ushered them out of her courtroom against the law to evade ICE, leading to her eventual arrest and then losing her judgeship, was that lawless? I have more examples, but we have to do them one at a time so we can create. I don't want to have darts on the dartboard. We got to walk through the examples. So was that lawless?
That was against the law.
Okay.
Yes.
So now we have two lawless judges.
Here we go. See this. Wait, real quick. He's doing it again, guys. And I explained this in my opening. And I'm glad he's exposing exactly what I said. He's going to do a tit for tat game of each individual actor, a rogue judge, and there's that or two maybe. And even then, there's some speculation about the one he mentioned previously, which was a Biden-appointed judge, by the way. And I'm not quite done yet when we talk about the left or the right, and we look at someone like, for example, if we look at this quote, let me ask you, Ryan, who said this quote? They have the They have to do the right thing, but it's really okay for them to be loyal to the person that appointed them to almost the highest position in the land, that is a justice of the United States Supreme Court. Who might have said that, Ryan?
I don't know.
It was Trump.
Okay. And again, if Trump is lawless and tyrannical, that has nothing to do with today's prompt at all.
Is he? Wait, I want you to go on the. Wait, I want you. I want this on the record.
That's
no, wait.
not today's prompt. I can
want
grant it for the sake of argument because
I don't
it's
want it
irrelevant.
granted for the sake of argument.
No,
I'm tired
Vince,
of hearing that
because
word. And I'm sure everybody
Vince,
that's been on these debate
I'm
scenes with you hates
here-
that word as well.
I'm not
I want you
here
on the record.
to talk
I want
to
you
you
on
about
the
random
record, Ryan.
shit.
Ryan.
Vince, I'm not
Okay,
here.
then I'm going to say it
talk to you
anyways.
about random
Ryan is
shit.
refusing to engage with this conversation because he knows
No,
that he
Vince,
cannot engage with it. Because
you're
for everything he
refusing
points
to
out,
engage
Donald Trump has
with
done 10
Trump.
times over.
It doesn't matter. If I grant that he did, it wouldn't matter. That's my point.
I'm not looking for you to grant. I'm looking for you to
Okay.
hold an actual position on your own
I
side, which you
don't
refuse
need
to do.
take positions on things that do not matter to the prompt. If you had a
Okay,
problem
wait, then
with
let me
the
ask you something.
prompt,
Wait,
then
Ryan,
you should
let me
have
ask you
said
something. Wait,
when we were discussing
Ryan, let me ask you
the
something.
prompt.
All right, Ryan, let me ask you something. If I were to arrange a debate with Admiral Gibbs on is the right lawless and tyrannical, will you accept that debate?
If you want to do, is the right lawless and tyrannical?
Yeah, will you accept that debate?
Maybe I'll think about it. Ask
Maybe I'll
nice.
think about it. Get out of here. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was walking through examples of judges being lawless on the left. We now have two. Can I continue coming up with examples of judges on the left being lawless?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Let's keep going. Let's keep going down this list. Sure.
Okay. There was a judge that said that Greg Bavino had to report to her every day, I think it was a her, about what he was doing with his ICE operations. How did that ultimately end? I know it got a lot of press that Greg Bavino was a bad boy and had to report to this judge. How was that ultimately decided? I can tell you because I know you're looking it up and I might as well just save us the time. The appellate court ruled that was an
Why are you even saying like, yeah, I see you looking it up like it's some kind of a dig? Yeah, of course I'm looking up some kind of weird rogue ruling you're bringing up. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, it got a lot of press about how bad Greg Bavino was. The fact that the judge that ordered him to check in was violating separation of powers in the Constitution got a lot less press. So I figured that you might not know about it.
Wait. I got a question for you. When the Court of Appeals blocked it, what did she do?
She ordered the judge to vacate her ruling. Yeah.
Oh, so she obeyed it, right?
Mm-hmm. And before that, she violated the Constitution.
Wait, you heard that? Wait, Tom, do you hear that? He said she obeyed it. So then this is a non-issue. This is a non-issue because
she eventually obeyed it.
Okay.
She eventually obeyed it.
Yeah.
So next one.
Well, no, she obeyed it. She obeyed it when ordered. Yes?
Oh, wait.
Right.
Yeah, she eventually obeyed it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Wow. After she was ordered, kind of like Donald Trump was ordered. But anyways, go ahead. We're going to ignore that. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. I mean, the camera dropped. So the point that I'm warming up to, but I think maybe we need to talk about it a different way because I'm not sure.
Of course, we have to talk about it a different way.
No, I'm not sure you're flowing.
I don't think you're flowing, buddy.
When you have a collection of judges that rule against Trump on politically motivated bases, does that
politically motivated bases, as if Trump has not done the same exact thing?
Is that going to be something that you consider either lawless or tyrannical?
If it were done on a purely political basis and they follow through with that particular thing, you could probably make the argument that it's lawless if you can show an evidence that it was actually based upon political biases. The reason why they brought it forward, not because of some correlation that a Republican was persecuted by a Democratic judge, which I know is what you're going with. Because every time you ask these questions, it's a dumb gotcha. But go ahead.
No, so for example, if a law says there shall be no judicial review,
stop the gotchas. Just get to the point.
Vince, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. You can spur it.
Then I'm just going to ignore it. I'm done playing these gotcha games. It's ridiculous.
Well, I'm debating 1v2. So if you're ignoring me, you might as well drop because there's no one else to talk to. So
I'll talk to Gibbs.
If you have a collection of judges who are consistently ruling that a statute that says there shall be no judicial review, in fact, allows them to have judicial review so that they can rule against Trump. Does that strike you as lawless?
I don't know. Who is it? Explain to me the details.
Okay, you don't know. Tom, do you know?
What was the question again?
Jesus. If you have a collection of judges who look at a law that says there shall be no judicial review, yet they continuously rule that there is judicial review so they can rule against Trump. Is that lawless or tyrannical?
I suppose it could be considered lawless.
So I need some background on this.
There was a great number of judges who did that in the TPS cases. The statute says there shall be no judicial review of the determinations made regarding the TPS determination of TPS programs. Yet numerous district courts across the country, always, despite the protestations of my opponents here, always from left-leaning districts with left-leaning appointments, over and over again ruled that they did in fact have this jurisdiction. They collected it. They collected them in the recent case. I'm blanking on the name. It's the TPS Supreme Court case that just came out. I can look it. I can look it up if you want the judges' names.
Well, while you're doing that, let me just ask you this, right? Because I guess this is really my issue, kind of with what you did. This is kind of what I said, right? And so this is why they keep saying you're throwing dots. Okay, my issue is this, right? Like what I have argued on other panels many times. Like I think it's like an organized top down. Maybe there's different factions that are saying top down, but what you're kind of doing right now is it seems like you're working backwards, right? You're saying this judge did this judge did this judge did this, and it seems like it's just kind of like it's these examples, right? And you're kind of like building a pattern backwards. What is the like show correlation that they're like in cahoots, I guess, like that's what is the systemic like what is the glue that's like the web that's making where is that like can you tell me what that is?
So what I said back, it feels like an eternity ago, but I'm probably only an hour or so, is that
decentralized.
The left operates in a decentralized way, the right tends to operate in a centralized way. So with the left, one of the challenges is that you have to connect all the dots, which starts with pointing out all the dots. So that's what I've been trying to do, is point out that there is organized resistance to the law on the left.
Wait, okay.
But hold on.
Wait, if it's organized,
that seems like that kind of seems like a cop out to me, right? Like, okay, I get that you can have like the cellular terrorist style, like, oh, this cell acts independently, like that makes sense, sure, okay. But the problem is then you can't turn around at the same time and be like, oh, well, then the higher ups are cahoots on it when the SPLC does one thing or Antifa does another thing, and then be like, oh, well, they're also in cahoots with Pelosi, because that would imply that there is a top down like centralized organization. So like I guess I like because if it seems decentralized, then it's like they're not tyrannical, right?
Then
like,
it's not really the left.
My argument is that they're tyrannical when they're in power, and that they're lawless when they're out of power. So the examples I gave of being tyrannical was about what the Biden administration did. And then when we're talking about lawless behavior, I'm talking about how they've been resisting the Trump administration, which had examples based on the way that the protests and Antifa have gone, the way that local government has acted, the way that national politicians have spoken about it, and the way that judges appointed by left-leaning administrations have behaved. So there are two different strands. Tyrannical, the examples I gave are about when they're wielding power. Lawless is about the way that they resist when the right has power.
So I guess you're saying you don't think there is any connection then between these three judges. They don't have like a central, hey, we all got to resist this one movement here.
I don't think they have like a club, though there are, if you want to give the example of more coordinated efforts, there an interesting one. Do you guys know about ELI and CJP?
Well, just real quick, it would even be like not even just organized, not even just coordinated or organized or centralized, but on top of that, even that these people are doing this at like a higher rate than like generally judges do these things, or that it's like happening at a higher rate from the left or things like that. Like these are things that that would like make a massive difference in the way that we looked at it. But from my understanding, and I've been through this with other debates, is that there is no like evidence that judges, Democrat appointed judges, are violating orders or engaging in unlawful judicial review or
Well, I gave you an example of one violating an order. I admit that I agree that's rare, but I did give you an example of one violating a Supreme Court order.
So
I
here's
don't
my.
think you heard what I just said. I don't. Literally.
You said
every
there's no,
single time
one
I
of the things
speak,
you said is there's
respond.
no evidence of them violating orders. And I pointed out that
No,
that's not
I
true.
didn't say that. I
It
didn't say
is
that. I
one
said
of the
there's
things you
no
said.
evidence that they do it at a higher rate statistically. I didn't say that there's no evidence that they do it. I said there's no evidence that they do it at a higher rate statistically. That was the
Okay.
whole point of everything that I just said.
So the way that this plays out is that I don't have the stat in front of me, but I'm sure we can find it. The Trump administration has been subject to, I believe, a record number of injunctions by lower courts. The lower courts, because you can choose where to file your lawsuit, are overwhelmingly being filed in very specific places. It's typically California courts, New York courts, Massachusetts courts, DC courts. It's exactly the places you would think that they would file these lawsuits. These cases are going against Trump in huge numbers at the district court level and being overturned at the appellate level and Supreme Court level in massive numbers. I assume you're going to say that that is also irrelevant because the fact that district courts are ruling against Trump and the fact that it's being done by democratically nominated judges in democratic strongholds and they're being overturned in record numbers is all also irrelevant.
Not
I'm
that
guessing-
it's
I'm guessing.
irrelevant, but that that it wouldn't. It would. I don't think that it would be evidence that they are doing anything lawless.
I got a
or
question.
wrong.
I got a question real
evidence?
quick. Hold on, I got a question. I
I
When we
literally
talk
just
about-
told you.
when we
I've
talk
said like
about-
10 times what would be evidence.
When we talk
go
about
ahead, Vince.
murder, how do we determine which one to charge them with? Between first, second, third degree, and maybe in some states, whatever, there's different statutes for different. How do we determine that? Behind what? What is it?
It depends how the law
The
is
intent.
written.
I'll skip there. The intent, right? The intent behind which they're doing it,
Mhm.
right? So what I've heard a common theme coming from you is that, again, it's more microscopic now, but it's the same thing you were doing earlier with the macro level, is that you're now saying, here is a Democratic appointed judge. I'm not going to show you how it was politically motivated. It was just, they ruled against our dear leader, Donald Trump. And that in and of itself is enough example to say that this was them acting lawless. But I don't see the connection there. Even in your own argument, you're drawing dots on a map. You're drawing, because the same thing can be said, by the way, about Republican appointed judges that are doing the same things to Joe Biden, whatever that may have been. So again, like this idea that somehow there's a D behind the name and they're ruling against our dear leader. And I also heard you kind of mention too, resisting Trump earlier when you're talking about local leaders, as if resistance inherently in and of itself is lawlessness. I don't know if that is necessarily lawlessness.
I have never in my life prior to this administration heard of a district court being reprimanded for ignoring a Supreme Court order. I've just never heard of it. Maybe it's happened and you could find an example. I've never heard of it. It's an extraordinary thing to have happened. It's extraordinarily rare.
Reprimanded?
Oh, okay, here
They
comes
got
some more.
reprimanded?
I've never heard before Donald Trump.
Wait. When did they get reprimanded?
In the DHSV DVD, when the court said you cannot ignore our orders, follow our orders.
I don't remember.
Yeah, okay, you're just saying in the dissenting writing that they said you can't do this. That's the reprimand.
No, I read you Kagan's concurrence, but the reprimand
that was the initial Supreme Court ruling.
No, the Supreme Court had an order which Kagan dissented
yes, they're
from.
saying afterwards. Yes,
and the lower
that's
court
what I said.
ignored that order and acted as if it had not been issued, and then it went back to the Supreme Court. And
That's what I just said.
That you
That's
may
what I
not,
just said. Why did you
ignore
say
our
no?
lower- So then, what are you confused about?
Because you're calling it a reprimand when really all it was Kagan in her dissenting writing just said, yes, you're not supposed to do this. That's like if you go okay, it's a reprimand.
Okay. It is extraordinarily unusual for an appellate court, let alone the Supreme Court, to have to tell a lower court you must follow orders we give. It's like unheard of. It would never it wouldn't occur to anybody. That's just not how law works. That's not how judges behave. It's an extraordinarily rare thing, but it's not the only example. Also, we could talk about Boasberg and the mandamus against him, but I was going to move to the ELI CJP example because that one, you guys seem to want ones that have more coordination. That I don't know if you're familiar. If you're not, I can give the background. Yes.
Listen,
No.
listen, I'm just going to tell you right now, if we're going to sit here for the next 30 minutes going over each individual court case that you seem to have some kind of like, it says a lot, by the way, that we're going down this rabbit hole of an argument that about all these different judicial judges, which again, I think is extremely disingenuous because you have not yourself answered. And I'll go back to, I'm not pointing this out for the audience, that you yourself seem to be doing something that as an attorney, you should know this, that the conservative and liberal Supreme Court justices does not mean that they're somehow inadvertently Republican or Democrat, or that they're conservative or liberal in the political sense. And I know that you have to know this as an attorney. Like,
Well,
do you agree to that?
Well, I actually tend to most of the time, though I do live in a space where I have members, prominent Democrats, calling to pack the U.S. Supreme Court specifically because there are too many right-appointed justices on it. So that does not seem to be the political landscape that we live in. So wait, why do you think I should ignore which party nominated a judge when the Democratic establishment is obsessed with which party established a judge? Why should I be held to that standard when your party does the exact opposite?
Well, so actually, that's interesting because I really, and this is something I keep coming back to. Can you just clarify this for me, Ryan? Like, because I'm really coming back to this. It's either they're systemically doing this, or it's disorganized thing, right? And so you keep pointing all these examples, right? And you just bring this up now. Why do I care which one's nominating the judge, right? And I think that's important, right? Because it's because if I was arguing this, right, I would be sitting there going, well, they want that matters because it is a top down. They're trying to put the cat got me here. Sorry. Anyway, it's a top down, a system where they're going, hey, they're putting these judges in power to fight the Supreme Court. They want to pack the court. They want to control the law. They're using the system to ensure they subvert the Constitution, right? That would be the argument that I kind of was expecting you to kind of push. But you seem to be making the argument that they're separate because they're either tyrannical when they're in charge or they're lawless and it's not connected. And so do you disagree that they're connected, or
the reason that they're separate is like, for example, the most tyrannical proposal I've heard from the left is it's a trifecta. There's a trifecta of when they get power, if they get it, all three branches, to pack the court, break the filibuster so they can pack the court more easily, and then recognize a bunch of new states so they get a bunch of Senate seats to create a structural advantage for the left going forward in the Senate. I think that's quite tyrannical. It's not illegal. It's totally legal. So you do need to separate legality from tyrannical, because there's a whole bunch of tyrannical stuff you can do that's not illegal. It is not illegal to pack the court. It's tyrannical to pack the court. And if I can't make the argument it's illegal because it's not.
But hold on. But also,
so then it
is
tyrannical?
Corruption. But hold on, it's also corruption to get your people in power and then change the rules so that your corruption is now legal. That's also corruption and lawlessness.
Corruption is not part of the prompt.
Right, I understand that. But hold on. Is corruption not lawlessness?
No.
No, it's not. You're not lawless, breaking laws when you be corrupt.
Corruption could be lawless. It also could be legal.
Right, that's what I'm saying though. Right. So when you have this gray area where you can legalize your corruption, right? It's you're doing oftentimes.
Again, I disagree with this. Illegality is part of the definition of corruption. It's again as why these terms are really frustrating me for all these things.
Those were crimes that you go get them.
But Tom, if there's no law against, for example, insider trading by politicians, so that Trump's trading or Nancy Pelosi's trading, all these things are legal, people still call it corrupt, right? Even if it's legal, they call it corrupt. Do you see what I'm saying? That's why I was separating the two, because you can have situations where people are accused of unfair dealings, or people are accused of when the right accuses the left of using NGOs to funnel money and policy. They're not saying it was illegal. They're saying it was corrupt. These things can all be distinct.
Yeah, but then they also go though. However, then they also go, oh, that was illegal until XYZ happened, right? And then so it's they institutionalize the crime, Like, and that is lawless, like to an extent, right? Like,
I
don't know. Do y'all not? I don't know.
Yeah, I
think
would
it's
be
just-
more-
I
would
don't even
more
agree
consider
with
that
this. I'm pretty sure that
tyrannical,
it's like part of the like Constitution that you're not supposed to use your office for personal gain. I'm pretty sure it's part of your oath to office. Now, when we say illegal, obviously the president has broad immunity, so whether or not he can actually be held like liable for it in court is one thing, but whether or not it would be considered illegal, no, I do think that like the things that people are pointing out with
and I wanna
Trump
be
is
clear, I'm
still
not attacking
corruption
you, right? 'Cause,
because it
like,
is illegal.
I'm just interested because that's like, because I know I'm trying to like be impartial, but that's where I thought this argument was going to go. It's kind of like this like connection between the two, and you really taken it in a very different way. So I'm guessing you don't agree with the sentiment of what
no,
I'm kind of
because
And that's
they're
literally
two-
what all of my prep was for as well, was like
Yeah, see, he read my mind, you know.
they're because they're two entirely different things. When I talk about the left being tyrannical in the way they use power, that of course is easier to centralize because they're using power. When I talk about them being lawless when they're out of power, that is by nature decentralized. So the way that I can demonstrate it is by giving a constellation of examples, because how do you prove a decentralized movement other than by giving the examples of the movement existing? There isn't
Right,
really
but
another way to attack the proof. But if we
can we
want to
go
talk
back
about
to what I said
centralization, we
before?
can talk about things that are centralized.
Well, so to go back to what I was saying before is that I was saying that I would even add another thing to that, to say that like there's another way that this could be shown, just to show that like they are doing these things at much higher rates than like the general group of judges or district judges. Now, as you said, the majority of the cases are going to liberal district judges, so obviously it's like extremely hard to calculate. But from what I've gone through, there isn't like an overruling percentage at proportional to the amount that they're getting cases that are getting overturned by the Supreme Court from democratically appointed judges versus Republican appointed judges. And so it's like, this is where if there was, like, if we're talking about somebody, a person or an individual or a group being lawless or criminal or any of these things, we would want to look at what it is they're doing versus the general population. Because just to say that like, oh, they got speeding tickets, that's breaking the law, therefore they're lawless, like, okay, I guess, but like it doesn't really mean much if they're not doing it at higher rates than the general population.
But can we speed run this? Because here's how this goes. Trump gets a record number of injunctions, which is going to be pretty easy to demonstrate because he has had a record number of injunctions.
And what has he done with those injunctions?
Then we say, are those injunctions generally issued by left-leaning judges in left-leaning districts? Also, yes. But then we're going to have to demonstrate that not only that, but that the particular injunctions were issued because of political bias, which then requires examining the specific cases anyway. Right, like that's the problem. Is that like this to get to the statistics, you need to actually show not just, and I'm just trying to be fair, not just that there was an injunction, but that the injunction was like improperly reasoned or somehow problematic. Because to be fair, it's not the judge's fault that the plaintiffs are choosing to sue in those districts. The plaintiffs are choosing to sue in those districts for strategic reasons, but that's not necessarily the judge's fault. So like,
wait. No, that's incredibly important. We have to pause there because that's incredibly important. What you just said completely just toppled your own tower, because then at that point, no, hold on. No. Because what you don't realize you just said, it's not the judge's fault for the plaintiff to bring the case. So guess what? The judge then is essentially absolved of that. When you try to sit there and say right and left and everything else, it is the person who is bringing the case before that judge. That is the real culprit behind this, not the judge.
Why was I telling Tom about this? What was I responding to?
Why were you responding to Tom? Because you were responding to him about the why we're digging into these little cases piece by piece, and you're explaining that you have to go into the nuance to prove that there was some political biases and draw that connection. And necessarily, I mean, we'd have to. And I paused you at the moment where you said, to be fair, these judges can't help when these plaintiffs are bringing the cases before them.
Well, I mean, the quick answer would be because Tom
asked,
right?
Tom asked for data to show disproportionality, and I was explaining to Tom why the data here that we have access to is unlikely to resolve the question because, as I said, the plaintiffs choose where to bring the cases. So that doesn't seem like a good metric.
Hold on.
So we end up not having useful data. And what we have to do is look at the individual cases, which is what I was doing in the first place. So the conversation, Vince, was about why the data that Tom is asking for is likely unavailable.
But hold on, but to what he's saying though, the reason, but you said something though, right, which was plaintiffs are going to pick these places because they're strategic, and so I'm guessing the way they would pick the place is if the judge has ruled a certain way more times than not. Wouldn't that be
correct?
So I guess this becomes chicken or the egg. Is that kind of like what you're saying? Like, I don't really like.
Yeah, they do. Plaintiffs are very well aware of which judges consistently rule against the Trump administration, and they bring cases in that district. I just was trying to be good faith with Tom. It's not the judge's fault that the plaintiffs choose that district, but the plaintiffs are choosing the district because they think the judges are favorable. So yeah, there is a chicken and the egg issue.
Is this unique to just the left?
No, but Tom asked about disproportionality, and Trump has been disproportionate. Trump has been enjoined more than basically any president I can think of. It's been wildly disproportionate in that regard. So I don't know, what time do you guys want to go to? I just want to make sure we're on the same.
We could call it here. Actually, it's about 2.5 hours. So this is no longer. Let's give some closings.
I could go down another rabbit hole.
No,
I'm sensing fatigue.
I think I think there's a perfect timing. Also, I just want to say, guys, if you're not already, guys, go and check out GridCon. We got the event up. It's gonna be amazing. Dallas, 24th. We're gonna have food. It's gonna be very fun. Vince is gonna be there. Tom was there last year. It's gonna be very good, guys. Hopefully get Ryan on one of these soon. But yes, check it out. The event flyer is in my chat. And I think right now it's free to go to, so it'll be good times. That might change soon. But yes, so check it out and get in now. Let's give outros, everybody, closing thoughts, and where to find you. Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, Ryan Mullally, Natural Law with Ryan Mullally. You can find me on X and YouTube. Thank you for all the support. Really appreciate people come by, and thanks for hosting. And, this got heated, but it was a fun conversation. So, I don't think anybody takes these things personally. At least I hope they don't. At the end of the day, there's endless examples of the left acting tyrannically when they're in power. We only went through a few, but the one that's been on everybody's mind recently is the open calls to pack the U.S. Supreme Court, pack the Senate, and then vitiate the Constitution, because if you pack the court, you can change the Constitution to mean whatever you want it to mean. And I think this is a tyrannical risk that the left has, as they typically do, obfuscated by only wanting to talk about Trump. On the other hand, when the left is out of power, we continuously see riots and violence. This has been the recent trend. And we see politicians excusing it, and we see local governments slow playing police responses. We see district court judges who are ruling consistently against Trump, and sometimes, yes, ignoring Supreme Court orders. In one instance, even illegally ushering an illegal alien out of the room, getting arrested and losing her judgeship. And the pattern continues. I didn't get into the examples of various NGOs that have been accused of attempting to corrupt the judiciary by posing as providing neutral judicial education when they're in fact advancing their positions in particular lawsuits contrary to legal ethics. But there's countless examples of this. The overall problem when pointing out the issues on the left is that the left, compared to the right, is decentralized. So in order to point these things out, you have to show people the pattern of behavior. You have to show people the countless examples. And then, of course, you're going to get the rejoinder, well, that's just one example. The question becomes how many times we can have just one example before people recognize the very obvious that there is, in fact, a pattern. But anyway, gang, I'm Ryan Mullally. You can find me Natural Law with Ryan Mullally. I appreciate you and appreciate your time.
All right, thank you so much, Vince.
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier in my opening, which is that we are going to see where the right is going to put a lot of different pins on the board and try to draw their little, string of yarn to connect the dots and say, and run to the excuse, well, they're decentralized, even though, as far as I understood, going further left would mean you would and necessarily look at a centralized form of government. I digress. We could do the tit for tat thing all day long, saying, well, here's the left. And as we've known, Ryan does not want to engage on any kind of topic when it comes to the right. We can also point to, just to address some of the points he mentioned at the very end, we could talk about all the different comments that we had seen from left-wing leaders where they did not condone the actions that were taken by violent protesters that led to then arrest. And just like we saw where there would have to be a necessary chain of custody to prove lawlessness, i.e. like we saw with Trump in the seditious six, we could also see this for those who do not exhibit lawlessness, those who obey the law. Namely, when we see Democratic leaders going out, condemning the violence, embracing their constitutional right to protest, by the way, because that's kind of the silent part being said here, is that they can't protest, okay? They can't say certain words because, oh, my pearls. They go in, they condemn the protests, they turn violent, and they then prosecute those. And typically, they're charged with violent protests. Now, Ryan would like to sit here and say, well, it was 3 days later. It's funny, too, how he'll sit there and say, well, the cops showed up 3 days late. And that was sufficient for him to prove that the left is lawless. But when me and Tom brought up the point that Donald Trump sat there and waited and sat on his hands with Abrego Garcia, but that's different. But that's it. He eventually obeyed. Well, then I'll use the cops eventually showed up. They eventually made arrests. And this is what we see. The right will never, ever, ever hold themselves to their own standards. And just like we have seen on this panel today, it will never change. They're going to force the left to be held to a totally different standard than they will hold their own to.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Tomfoolery.
Yeah, I mean, I spent the majority of the time during this debate trying to explain the standards that Ryan could use to get to the point where this would make sense, where there would be a systemic difference of how the left acts versus the right, or how they act differently versus the general population, how they're doing things that are special. If you just say that somebody acts lawless, as I said earlier, but just by breaking the speed limit, well, the majority of people break the speed limit. So while it is somebody who's doing something against the law, it's not something that's special in any way, meaning your term lawless is kind of meaningless in this context. It doesn't actually tell us anything about that person if they're literally just like everybody else in the end. And I feel like over and over, we went through a ton of anecdotes, which my chat has been saying. Tom said this is exactly what they were going to do yesterday when prepping for this, is that yes, they are just going to go over one anecdote after another, after another, after another, just kind of pointing out certain instances of where somebody on the left committed a crime, or where somebody on the left did something that was against the law, or where somebody on the left did something that could be considered tyrannical. But this doesn't characterize the entire left. And I said at the beginning of the debate that we were going to have to use the right in order to compare. If you do a study, you need something that is a constant in order to compare the other things to know if it's different than that in any way. And if we keep looking at the left saying, hey, the left is super tyrannical over the last 20 years, but they're not nearly doing nearly as many tyrannical acts as the right over the last 20 years, again, it's just kind of a meaningless statement. It doesn't say much about the left if they're doing this at a much lower rate. To say that there's a bunch of different people who do a bunch of different things that can be characterized in a bunch of different ways, that's not surprising. There's people on the right that are good, there's people on the left that are good, there's people on the right that are bad, there's people on the left that are bad. But whether or not you can characterize the entire group with a simple label, you're going to need a lot of evidence, you're going to need a lot of data, and you're going to need to prove that this is different. This is statistically different than the general population or the general groups of people who are in politics. And we did not come anywhere near that in this debate. As I said, the majority of the time was spent trying to explain how you could make that point. And instead of it ever being engaged with, when I would give examples of, hey, if I wanted to make this point about the right, I would give these states about Alaska, or I would give all of these different Republican administrations. I was accused of doing whataboutism instead of me explaining to you how this could be done. I was accused of whataboutism, which that's not whataboutism. This is me just giving a hypothetical to say, hey, if you want to make this argument, you want to convince me of this, this is how you could do it. And I feel like I couldn't be more good faith by telling somebody exactly how to make their arguments in a way that's actually conducive to the point that they're trying to make. So I don't think we came anywhere near making the point that the left is tyrannical nor lawless, especially not from a top-down structure. Outside of that, my name's Tom. I go by Tomfoolery Show. Stream every day, 8 to 10 hours on YouTube, youtube.com/Tomfoolery Show. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks so much. That was very fun. Yeah, that debate really didn't go where I thought it was going to. It's a pretty interesting direction to go. And I thought it was a pretty good one.
That is not what I prepped for.
Yeah, I wasn't. It went a lot of places I wasn't expecting, but it was good overall. But we're gonna rate prevail on my side. YouTube, we're out for the night. But here about an hour, we're gonna be back starting our weekend content. So come back here in an hour, guys. But thanks so much, everybody, for being here. Y'all be good. Adios, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Take care, y'all.
Tom, out of curious, what did you prep for?
Data, mostly data. So like, as I said, if we're going to like make statements about what it is that the left does or doesn't do, that we're going to have like equal opposite data on the other side. So like data showing that the right is admissible of violence, they engage in more political violence, that there's polling showing that they believe that they need to commit violence at higher rates in order to get the country back on track. Those sorts
like
of
the
things.
political violence polling, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the polling studies on political violence, and then also, yeah, like I said, I brought up, the fact that like the Republican administrations had, over 400 indictments over the last 5 administrations and 3 from Democrats. Like there were just, a lot of things like that showing like top-down leadership kind of, and statements from Republican leaders being permissive of criminal behavior and
yeah, that's really where I thought it was going to go. Was more of like the systemic lawless kind of angle, but obviously from the more Republican side. If I'd been, so it's interesting that you were kind of differentiating quite a bit. Like because
they strike me as very, very different things, and you would need to talk about them in different ways, right? Where it's like indictments, for example. Like if you're going to separate tyrannical and lawless, mass politically motivated indictments wouldn't be an example of lawlessness. It would be an example of tyranny. Right?
Sure, but the examples of convictions the convictions are proportional to the indictments as well.
Well, I was going to say, go back to the founding fathers example, right? So, okay, like the King, whatever, George, right?
I feel like we're getting back into the debate.
Well, I'm just like kind of.
I'm going to bounce a second. I was just curious.
Yeah, I was
curious what he meant.
Because this is where I thought it was going. I was like, King George comes in here, he puts out like the stamp tax or the T Act, right? And so, it's legal. But it's like it's oppressive, and therefore they're not being representative. Though thus it is illegal and tyrannical, right? It's the system, and so they fight, even though they're lawless. They're fighting against the tyranny, right? And so like it was the system kind of aspect to the tyranny that's like being lawless, and that like it's not like that they're separate. That was kind of where I thought this was gonna go, and like I don't know, like Tom.
Because King George wasn't lawless. King George was a tyrant, but he wasn't lawless.
But he was doing it illegally. It is illegal and tyrannical because they weren't getting the representation, right?
Well, but it was legal to not have representation in the British monarchy. It was legal. It's just the laws were unjust.
Right. Which is okay.
You see what I mean?
But it's like post hoc though. It's like you're going and looking like, it's unjust. Thus it's illegal. We had a justified reason to it.
That's what I was saying at the beginning, that like most tyrants are acting legally. Most tyrants control what's legal and illegal, so they can act legally because they control what the law is. But anyway, gang.
That'll be good. I gotta go do something.
Talk to you later.
Thank y'all.
Later, guys.
All right, later.